Chapter 129. As the saying goes, some people are happy while others are sad. For the League of Mountains and Seas, the fact that Ouyang Shaw was a mutant representative of the Yellow Emperor's camp was undoubtedly a huge boon. On the contrary, to the Han-Dan alliance led by Di Chun, it was like a bolt from the blue. The two factions, which were originally evenly matched, were instantly able to determine who was superior. At the registration point, some Lord-level players had already started contacting Ouyang Shaw after seeing that Feng Xiaohuang was representing Fallen Phoenix Town in joining the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. As soon as the announcement came out, some of the Lord-level players who had yet to disperse became even more anxious. Regardless of whether or not Ouyang Shaw agreed, they led their own forces and followed the main force of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. Ouyang Shaw did not wish to reject all of these players. If they wanted to win this war, they would have to rely on the power of the Mountain and Sea Alliance alone. If he could unite the players of his faction by his side, it would undoubtedly increase his chances of victory. Of course, things wouldn't go as smoothly as he thought. Firstly, the Han-Dan alliance represented by Di Chun would never cooperate with Ouyang Shaw. In addition, in the past 6 months, Di Chun and the others had not only managed their own territories, but also tried to infiltrate other territories. Therefore, in the Yellow Emperor's camp, there were still some die-hard followers of Di Chun or allies who would not easily join Ouyang Shaw's side. Secondly, generally speaking, Overlord players were more conceited. Many of them were either the heirs of large to medium-sized organizations, but in real life, they behaved like rich kids, and it was difficult for them to obey the leadership of others, or they were top professional players who had already reached the pinnacle of adventure mode and started to play territory management mode, so there was no lack of rebellious people among them. Therefore, it was almost impossible to unite all the players of the same faction. Ouyang Shaw didn't dare to have such extravagant hopes. In his plan, it would be considered a success if he could gather 5,000 soldiers. Therefore, Ouyang Shaw did not refuse these players who took the initiative to express goodwill. Of course, Ouyang Shaw wouldn't rashly agree to let them join his side before he'd clearly understood their abilities. Ouyang Shaw said that he would wait until they found a suitable place to set up camp and settle down before discussing the matter of cooperation with everyone. Therefore, a group of people walked out of the Yellow Emperor city in a mighty manner. The scenery of the wilderness was revealed to the players for the first time. It was impossible for them not to be shocked. It was currently summer, the most vigorous season of the year. On the boundless plains, trees were overgrown, thorns were everywhere, and wild grass was lush. Those unknown weeds covered an adult's knees. A gust of wind blew past, setting off waves of green. Amidst the undulating grass, hundreds of beasts cried out in unison. There were countless tigers, leopards, jackals, and wolves. It was extremely dangerous. Seeing such a scene, Ouyang Shaw naturally did not dare to go far. He ordered Lin Yi to lead a cavalry platoon and search for a suitable place to set up camp with spies from the intelligence division near Yellow Emperor City. In ancient times, when marching and fighting, setting up a camp was very particular and could not be sloppy. There's a saying in Sun Tzu's Art of War: all armies love to go high and hate to go low. They love to go high and low. They love to go 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 high. They love to go low. They love to go high. 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 They love, that is to say, most garrisons prefer dry uplands and avoid wet depressions. They value places that face the sun and avoid dark places. They are close to water and grass. They are well supplied with supplies, and the officers and men are immune to all kinds of diseases, so that they have a guarantee of victory. Other than that, they also have to avoid forests and rivers. Considering that the Chiyu camp was attacking from the southeast to the northwest, Ouyang Shaw specially told them to try to find a suitable place on the west side of Yellow Emperor City. This way, they could avoid being used as cannon fodder in a head-on clash, and they could also act as the flank of Yellow Emperor City and quickly rush to the battlefield. An hour later, Lin Yi and the group returned. Lin Yi quickly dismounted and said, "Sir, we found a hillside on the west side of Yellow Emperor City. About 5 kilometers south of the hillside, there is a large river. The tributary of the river is very close to the hillside, so it is easy to get water. I think that this is a suitable place to set up camp." Ouyang Shuo nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, "Good, everyone is here. Let's go." After the group arrived at the camp, they immediately got to work. First, they had to cut down or burn all the annoying weeds to create a large enough space. Next, they had to obtain the nearby forest, cut down the trees, and set up camp. In order to ensure the safety of the camp had to be surrounded by a temporary wooden wall. The method was to first cut down 2 rows of tree trunks, one long and one short. After burning the bottom of the tree trunks, half of it would be buried in the soil. The long tree trunks would be in a tight row on the outside, and the short tree trunks in a row on the inside. Then, the 2 rows of tree trunks would be separated into 2 layers. This way, the long tree trunks would become the protective wall. The upper layer of the wooden planks would allow soldiers to patrol, and the lower layer would allow soldiers to store defensive weapons and rest. When setting up camp, there were 50 people in a team, and everyone's tents faced each other. Around the tents and between the camp area, they had to dig drainage ditches. Soldiers were strictly forbidden to move between the camps, and within the camp area, they were not allowed to move between tents. Every camp area had to have a public toilet, far away from the water source and food storage area. At the same time, it had to be a certain distance away from the barracks, but not too far in case the soldiers couldn't return in time. In each camp area, there had to be enough space for training and military maneuvers. It was close to noon when the camp was finally cleared out. While the troops were still cutting down trees and digging ditches, Ouyang Shuo had Wang Feng lead an infantry team and follow him. In the middle of the camp, Ouyang Shuo took out the tents he had bought before and had the soldiers help him set up the tents so that it would be convenient for everyone to discuss matters. Otherwise, it would be a mess everywhere and it wouldn't look good. Compared to the military tents, the tents were 5 times bigger. They were similar to the tents of nomadic tribes, and they could easily accommodate 20 to 30 people. Otherwise, they wouldn't be worthy of their expensive price. After setting up the tents, Ouyang Shuo took out the custom-made chairs and benches from the carpentry workshop, and a simple command center was set up. Seeing Ouyang Shuo taking out items from his interspatial pouch like magic, Mulan Yue, who was following behind him like a curious baby, widened her eyes and said in surprise, "Ah, big brother Wooey, why is your interspatial pouch so big? You can store so many things." Ouyang Shuo explained with a smile, "My interspatial pouch has already expanded to 1,000 cubic meters. Of course it's big." Ouyang Shuo didn't want to dwell on this issue, so he quickly said, "All right, the tents are set up. Let's call the others over and discuss what we should do next." "Okay." Mulan Yue nodded cutely. Ouyang Shuo sat in the middle of the tent. On his left and right sat Feng Xiaohuang, Baiwa, Mulan Yue, and the Siege Lion. Behind the 4 of them sat their respective deputies. "Now that we've settled down, what do you plan to do next?" Ouyang Shuo asked. Feng Xiaohuang was a shrewd person, and she was the only one who didn't belong to the Mountain and Sea Alliance. The Mountain and Sea Alliance must have already discussed this, and how Wooey was actually asking about Luo Fengtown's plans. Feng Xiaohuang nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Lord Wooey, you can just say what you plan to do. Since our Luo Fengtown has joined your camp, it means that we will follow your arrangements." Ouyang Shuo nodded approvingly and said, "Lord Feng Xiaohuang is indeed straightforward. Then I'll be straightforward." Puffed. Mulan Yue suddenly burst into laughter, and when she saw everyone's confused gazes, she said with slight embarrassment, "I heard Big Brother Wooey and Big Sister Phoenix call me Lord. It's quite interesting." Feng Xiaohuang came to a realization and said to Ouyang Shuo with a smile, "Indeed, let's get rid of these titles." My real name is Feng Wu, Brother Wui. Please don't treat me like an outsider. Ouyang Shua nodded and continued. In order to make it easier to command, I suggest that we combine the 5 forces together and have a unified command. Specifically, we should divide the forces into cavalry, sword and shield troops, and crossbow troops. I suggest that General Zhang Liao be the commander of the cavalry, with Lin Yi and Hong Ying as his deputies. General Shi Wansui will be the commander of the sword and shield troops, with Siege Lion and Wang Feng as his deputies. General Mu Ging will be the commander of the crossbow troops, with Zhao Sihu and Di Qiu as his deputies. Zhu Shou will be the strategist, with Qing Yi and Qing Wan as his deputies. Ouyang Shua's plan took care of all aspects. It guaranteed Shanghai Town's position as the core, and also took care of the interests of all the allies. Of course, all of this was still based on merit. As for the cavalry, it mainly consisted of Shanghai Town and Lingxi Town's troops, with 1 commander and 2 deputies. This ensured a smooth command, and it was easier for the soldiers to accept. As for the sword and shield troops, Shi Wansui had absolute authority. At the same time, he also took care of the interests of the weaker side, Siege Lion, and arranged for him to be the deputy commander, commanding his own sword and shield troops. Finally, there were the crossbow troops. Shanghai Town's 500 crossbowmen were the main force. However, Ouyang Shua voluntarily gave up the leadership of the crossbow troops to Mu Qing. This arrangement showed his full trust in this female general, and she was indeed more suitable to be the commander than Zhao Sihu. As the other 200 archers were from Luofeng Town, Ouyang Shua arranged for Luofeng Town's Di Qiu to be the deputy commander. Luofeng Town might be the one at a disadvantage here. They had 500 people, but they lacked a famous general, so they could only give up the leadership of the troops. This was also the reason why Ouyang Shua hesitated before. He only revealed his plan after Feng Qiuhuang clearly expressed her opinion. To be continued. Chapter 130. After listening to Ouyang Shua's plan, Feng Qiuhuang became pensive. Her understanding of Ouyang Shua had deepened. She smiled and said, "Brother Wui's plan is very good. I have no objections." Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "Since no one has any objections, then we will split the camps according to the reorganized troops. I would like to ask the 2 generals, Shi Wansui and Zhang Liao, to take charge of the specific arrangements. How about it?" Shi Wansui and Zhang Liao immediately stood up and said, "Thank you, sir, for your trust. We will not let you down. Let me say this first. The goal of the reorganized troops is to form a united force and face the final battle together. During the process, you will need to complete the side quests independently. The Alliance will not restrict you. Not only that, if you need help, the Alliance can also arrange for reinforcements." Ouyang Shua explained. Everyone had their own selfish motives. As the leader of the Alliance, if they could not respond to these selfish motives and blindly made everyone sacrifice their own interests for the sake of the team, then the Alliance would eventually collapse. Only by building on the foundation of common interests and achieving a win-win situation could an alliance last. Feng Qiuhuang and the rest nodded their heads in satisfaction. Baihua asked, "Wui, what about us? What do you need us to do?" "That's right. Although we are not generals or strategists, we can still help." Feng Qiuhuang followed. Among the 5 lords, Ouyang Shua and Siege Lion were generals. Mulan Yue was a tailor, Baihua was a healer, and Feng Qiuhuang was a knight. As for us, we will also divide up the work. I will be responsible for contacting Huangdi City and gathering information. Baihua and Feng Wu, you will be responsible for contacting other players. Filter them out and remove those who are arrogant or have bad intentions. As for the others, as long as they accept our reorganization, they can join our faction. As for you will be responsible for contacting and coordinating." Ouyang Shua said after thinking for a while. Baihua and Feng Qiuhuang were both female lords with great influence. White Birch had absolute authority in the professional player community. He had a deep understanding of the various professional lords. On the other hand, this was Feng Qiuhuang's first time playing a game, so she did not know much about professional players. However, her understanding of the representatives of the various factions far surpassed Bai Hua's. The two complemented each other and could be said to be a perfect match. Coupled with their own charisma, they were the most suitable candidates to screen players. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Ouyang Shuo and Wang Feng left the campsite and set off for Yellow Emperor City. In the records of the Grand Historian, the Annals of the Five Emperors, Sima Qian used a consistent and concise method to outline the magnificent and legendary life of the Yellow Emperor from birth to death. The Yellow Emperor was the son of Xiaodian. His surname was Gongsun, and his given name was Xianyuan. Like many ancient legends, Gongsun Xianyuan seemed to have been born miraculous. Not long after he was born, he began to speak. His talent, diligence, and sincerity allowed him to naturally grow into an extraordinary person who was knowledgeable and able to distinguish between facts and reason. Gongsun Xuanyuan's era was a time of change. The once powerful Shinnong clan had been declining day by day. Various tribes and countries were at war with each other, and the common people were suffering. Shinnong was unable to punish the strong and help the weak. At this time, Gongsun Xianyuan, who was on the rise, seized the opportunity to launch a crusade against the tribes that did not come to pay tribute, using force to force them to submit to Shinnong's authority. However, there was one tribe that couldn't do anything to him. It was the Qiyu tribe, known for its bravery and battle prowess. Later, the equally powerful Yan Emperor's tribe attempted to invade the various tribes. This caused the weaker tribes to quickly gather under Gongsun Xuanyuan's banner to seek the protection of the strong. The two great tribes, Yan Emperor and Gongsun Xianyuan, could not avoid a battle. Gongsun Xianyuan implemented a series of effective measures to increase his strength, such as cultivating virtue, reorganizing the army, researching the 4 seasons, and planting the 5 grains. He also tamed a group of fierce beasts, namely Xiong Pai and Xiu Tiger, in preparation for the decisive battle with Yan Emperor. The battle finally broke out in the plain of Banquan. After several fierce battles, Gongsun Xianyuan defeated Yan Emperor and forced him to submit. At this time, Gongsun Xianyuan had become the leader of all the tribes in the world and could give orders to them. After the Yellow Emperor forced Yan Emperor to submit, he ordered Yan Emperor to assign local officials. Yan Emperor sent Qiyu to serve in Shandong, but when Qiyu arrived there, he sent troops to expel Yan Emperor. Yan Emperor was no match for Qiyu, so he fled north to Zhuolu and asked for help from the Yellow Emperor. Thus, Gongsun Xianyuan summoned the vassals and united the armies of the various tribes to launch an unprecedented battle with Qiyu in the plain of Zhuolu. The outcome of the battle was that the tribal alliance led by Gongsun Xianyuan completely defeated Qiyu's tribe and killed him. After that, Gongsun Xuanyuan's prestige skyrocketed. All the tribes in the Central Plains followed the trend and elected him as the Son of Heaven, officially replacing Shinnong as the ruler of the world as the Yellow Emperor. The records of the Grand Historian said that the Yellow Emperor's tribe migrated to and fro places, using troops as camp guards. It seemed to be a portrayal of nomadic tribes. Yan Emperor's imperial title was related to fire. Some people called him Lai Shan, perhaps because he set fire to the mountains to open up wastelands for farming. He should be a farming tribe. Qiyu was in Dongyi, and legend had it that he mastered metal weapons and was more advanced. He might also be a farming tribe. In fact, farming and nomadic herding might not have been completely separated at that time. They just had different proportions. Therefore, the Battle of Banquan was a battle between shepherds and farmers, a clash between nomadic and farming civilizations. The Battle of Zhuolu reflected the confrontation between the Huaxia and Dongyi tribes. Shinnong was not a definite figure, but a family that surpassed the concept of tribes and had been the ruler of the tribes for hundreds or even thousands of years. It was similar to the Zhou royal family of the Eastern Zhou dynasty, and later referred to the historical period between the end of the mythological era and the beginning of the legendary era. Yan Emperor, Yellow Emperor, and Qiyu were all heroes during Shinnong's era. Therefore, in the grand scheme of things, they all belonged to Shinnong, but they represented different tribes. When their rulers' power declined, they all wanted to gain control over the land, people, and property of the world. Therefore, there were constant wars between them. Finally, after the Battle of Zhuolu, the Yellow Emperor won the world and became the protagonist of the protagonists. The starting point of this battle was after Gong's son, Xianyuan, defeated Yin Emperor and before the Battle of Zhuolu broke out. During this period, the two sides had been in a stalemate for a long time. Qiu's tribe came from afar and first built Qiyu City as a stronghold. Later, Yinglong destroyed Qiyu City by releasing water, so Qiyu had to go up the mountain to build a stronghold. Qiyu Stronghold was divided into 3 strongholds, connected to each other. Qiyu Stronghold was less than 10 kilometers away from Yellow Emperor City. Not far from Yellow Emperor City, there was Yin Emperor Camp, the stronghold of Yin Emperor's tribe. Players from Yellow Emperor's camp could rush to Yin Emperor Camp to find branch missions. Ouyang Shuo and Wang Feng prepared to enter Yellow Emperor City from the west gate. 2 guards stood on each side of the gate. They wore black linen clothes and had necklaces made of beast teeth around their necks. They held stone axes in their hands. The structure of the stone axes was similar to the spears of the Shang and Zhou dynasties. The main body was a 1.5-meter-long wooden pole. At the top of the pole was an axe polished from a special stone. The blade was curved and looked extremely sharp. After the guards checked Ouyang Shuo's identity token, they immediately let him in. Ouyang Shuo had wanted to bribe the guards with gold coins and ask for information. However, on second thought, gold was not something that could be used in primitive societies. He could only give up. After entering the city, Ouyang Shuo did not immediately seek an audience with Yellow Emperor. As a representative of the Inhumans, he had the right to meet the leader of the camp. However, if he didn't have any urgent matters, it would displease the Yellow Emperor if he were to disturb the Great Boss. It wasn't worth it. In Yellow Emperor's tribe, besides the leader Yellow Emperor and Ancestor Lei, there were 4 important ministers: Feng Ho, Li Mu, Chang Xian, and Dahong. Among them, Feng Ho was the minister, and Li Mu was the general. Chang Xian was the inventor of the drum. As for Dahong, he was good at training troops. Ouyang Shuo planned to use Ancestor Lei as his breakthrough point. The source of his confidence was naturally the unique, colorful silkworm of Shanhai Town. As an outstanding representative of the female ancestors, Ancestor Lei created the method of planting mulberry silkworms and weaving silk. She admonished the Yellow Emperor, decreed agriculture and mulberry cultivation, regulated clothing, promoted marriage, respected etiquette, built the palace, was the mother of the world, and benefited the people. She was the first silkworm. As Yellow Emperor's concubine, Ancestor Lei naturally lived in the tribe's palace. Of course, according to the productivity of a primitive society, even the tribe's palace was just a slightly larger mud house. The tribe's palace was located in the center of Yellow Emperor City. There were guards at the entrance, and it was extremely spacious. It occupied a very large area, fully demonstrating the noble status of the royal family. Like other tribal buildings, the structure of the palace was also mousy soil stairs. That was to say, the stairs were made of rammed earth, wooden frames were used as bones, grass and mud were used as skin, and the roof was covered with straw. The entire palace was not a single building. Instead, it was a group of 4 to 5 adobe houses. It looked very spectacular. The main hall was 8 meters high, and the highest point was close to 10 meters. Just the stairs at the bottom were 1 meter high. The outer walls of the palace were made of yellow mud mixed with grass and looked very sturdy. After the yellow mud was dried, it was not afraid of rain. Its color was bright and beautiful. It was very practical. This was because in primitive society, people would dig a fire pit in the house to cook and warm themselves in the winter. Therefore, to solve the problem of smoke discharge, they had to open an opening on the roof. However, if they opened an opening, it would leak in the rain, so they had to build a straw roof. The entire system looked very scientific and reasonable. It had to be said that such a primitive building was full of wild beauty. It was simple and practical. Ouyang Shuo thought that if Sun Xiaoya saw such a building, she would definitely be infatuated with it. To be continued. Chapter 131. Ouyang Shuo brought Wang Feng to the entrance of the palace. The guard at the entrance stopped the two and scolded. The palace is an important place. Unauthorized people are not allowed to come near. Who are you? Get out of here. Ouyang Shuo smiled and said respectfully, Brother guard, please send a message. How can a mutant be without clothes? I have a treasure to offer to concubine origin. The guard was startled. Ever since Ouyang Shuo was identified as the mutant representative of a Yellow Emperor's camp, all the NPCs in the camp automatically knew of his existence. Therefore, when he heard Ouyang Shuo introduce himself, the guard didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately softened his attitude and said embarrassedly, So you are the mutant representative. Please wait for a moment. I will go and send the message. Thank you. Ouyang Shuo nodded. 10 minutes later, the guard returned and said to Ouyang Shuo, Concubine Origin invites you in. Ouyang Shuo and Wang Feng followed behind the guard and entered the palace. Along the way, Ouyang Shuo looked at the layout of the palace. Everything seemed extremely simple, practical, and typical of the barbaric style. The guard brought them to a side hall and said, You can go in by yourselves. Concubine Origin is inside. Thank you. Ouyang Shuo expressed his gratitude again. Entering the side hall, they saw a beautiful young woman sitting in the seat of honor. Her facial features were exquisite, and the lines of her face were a bit stiff. Her nose bridge was slightly high. Her long hair was directly draped over her shoulders without any adornment. She looked very amiable and natural. She wore a white silk short-sleeved dress that only reached her knees, revealing a pair of slightly tanned arms and a pair of extremely healthy and beautiful calves. It fully displayed the wild beauty of the primitive society. The woman's shoulders were draped with a yellow shawl that was tied at the waist. On her fair forehead, there was a piece of jade tied with a bead necklace. It looked extremely noble. Apart from that, there was also a swallow-shaped jade hanging around her neck. No one knew what it meant. Needless to say, this must be ancestor origin. On both sides of the side hall sat 3 young women and a cute little girl. Their clothes were basically similar to ancestor origin, but they didn't have the jade on their foreheads. One of the women was ugly. Ouyang Shuo guessed that she should be the Yellow Emperor's 4th concubine, Tongmu. From this, it could be inferred that the other 2 women should be the other 2 concubines of the Yellow Emperor, Nu Jie and Lady Tongyu. As for the little girl, she was only about 11 or 12 years old. Ouyang Shuo couldn't guess her identity, but it was very likely that she was one of the Yellow Emperor's daughters. The little girl was extremely delicate. She had long eyebrows, big eyes, and a face with a little baby fat. Her skin was fair and tender, just like a porcelain doll. The little girl was wearing a silk short-sleeved long skirt, revealing a pair of white and tender arms. The skirt was pure white, without any embroidery. Only a belt made of jade was tied around her waist. The skirt also only reached her knees, and she wore a pair of deerskin boots. Her straight, jet-black hair was casually draped over her shoulders. Both sides of her hair were braided with white ribbons, with a few white feathers stuck at the ends. On her head was a garland, and around her neck was a swallow-shaped jade. Even on her right wrist, there was a chain made of jade strung together, making her look wild and playful. Ouyang Shuo didn't know how to address the Yellow Emperor's concubines, so he directly used the name of the later generations. He bowed and said, How can a strange man be naked? Greetings, ladies. In Ouyang Shuo's eyes, the clothes of ancestor origin and the others were full of wild and exotic charm. However, in the eyes of ancestor origin and the others, Ouyang Shuo and Wang Feng's clothes were also strange. Since it was a battle map, Ouyang Shuo was naturally dressed like a general. Whether it was the radiant armor on his body or the Tang sword on his waist, in the eyes of ancestor origin and the others, they were no different from divine weapons. One should know that they were still in the Stone Age, and even bronze weapons were only possessed by the Qiyu tribe in the south. This kind of weapon and equipment forged from fine iron was definitely beyond their imagination. The little girl was extremely lively. Seeing Ouyang Shuo She wasn't afraid of strangers and directly ran over from her seat. It seemed that she wanted to touch Ouyang Shua's armor, and was especially curious about the pair of glittering golden round shields on the chest of the radiant armor. Ancestor Origin scolded, "Mayer, don't be rude." Ouyang Shua was startled. Could it be that this little girl in front of him was Xianyuan Mei, the daughter of the Yellow Emperor, the legendary goddess Hamba? But she didn't look like the legend at all. How could such a cute little girl be the ugly Hamba? It must be another fabrication made up by the later generations. Ouyang Shua was very fond of Xianyuan Mei. He took out a delicate sheathed dagger from his storage pouch and handed it to her, saying with a smile, "This is a small gift for your highness." Xianyuan Mei had just been scolded by her mother. Although she was very fond of the dagger Ouyang Shua gave her, she didn't dare to accept it. She blinked her big eyes and looked at Ancestor Origin with a pitiful expression. Ancestor Origin laughed inwardly and said without batting an eyelid, "Since it's a gift from a guest, just accept it." "Thank you, mother." Xianyuan Mei giggled, and her expression immediately brightened up. She took the dagger and didn't forget to say to Ouyang Shua, "Thank you too, guest from afar." "I like this gift very much." Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "It's good that the little princess likes it." After Xianyuan Mei returned to her seat and sat down, Ouyang Shua then said, "Honorable Consort Yuan, I have something that I want to present to you. I hope you will allow it." Ancestor Origin nodded. After the little episode just now, her impression of Ouyang Shua had improved a lot. Her attitude also became more amiable as she said, "May I know what it is? If it's too precious, it's better not to. Please rest assured, consort. Although this thing is rare, it's useless if it's placed somewhere else. Only in your hands will it be able to display its true value." Ouyang Shua explained. "Oh, there's such a thing?" Ancestor Origin asked with interest. Ouyang Shua nodded and signaled Wang Feng, who was standing behind him, to present the previously prepared gift. The gift was placed in an exquisite sandalwood box. In addition to 30 colorful silkworms, there were also unhatched silkworm eggs. The reason why Ouyang Shua brought the silkworm eggs was because he was afraid that an accident would happen to the colorful silkworms during the transmission. Ancestor Origin motioned to the maid standing on the side to take the wooden box from Wang Feng and put it on the table in front of her. Opening the box, she was pleasantly surprised to see the colorful silkworms slowly crawling inside. She asked with uncertainty, "Is this also a type of silkworm?" "Yes." Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "This is an extremely rare colorful silkworm. Not only does its body show different colors, but the silk it spits out is also colorful." Receiving a positive answer, Ancestor Origin finally smiled and said to Ouyang Shua, "Very good. I like this gift very much. You're very thoughtful." Ouyang Shua's preparation was far more than Ancestor Origin had imagined. Seeing that Ancestor Lei accepted the gift, Ouyang Shua took out 7 bolts of colorful silk from his storage pouch, covering all 7 colors, and said respectfully, "These are silk weaved with colorful silk. Please have a look, Empress. If Consort doesn't mind, please accept it." Ouyang Shua gave out these silks to prove that he didn't lie and that colorful silkworm silk could indeed be woven into colorful silk. Secondly, he wanted to take this opportunity to give gifts to the other 3 concubines of the Yellow Emperor. When giving gifts, the biggest taboo was to not consider thoroughly and give the wrong gift to the wrong person. In that case, it was very likely that he would offend the other party. Ouyang Shua naturally wouldn't make such a low-level mistake. Otherwise, if one of the concubines felt that they had lost face because they didn't receive a gift, they would harbor hatred towards Ouyang Shua and then talk pillow talk to the Yellow Emperor. Then, wouldn't all of Ouyang Shua's previous efforts be in vain? As the saying goes, everyone loves beauty, let alone a group of women. Seeing the silks presented by Ouyang Shua, the concubines present were extremely moved. Their expressions became even more amiable, no longer as expressionless as when Ouyang Shua first came in. Ouyang Shua was overjoyed, knowing that he had made the right move. As a concubine, Ancestor Lei was very shrewd. Of course, Ouyang Shua's little trick couldn't escape her eyes. She was very satisfied with Ouyang Shua's thoughtfulness and said with a smile, "Accepting such a precious gift from you, you should be rewarded. Tell me, what kind of reward do you want?" Ouyang Shua's heart skipped a beat. Before he came here, he didn't think that there would be such a thing. This gift was just to increase Ancestor Lei's good impression of him, and then the Yellow Emperor's good impression of him, so that it would be convenient for him to take the next step. How could he have imagined that there would be rewards? Ouyang Shua sincerely said, "It's just a small gift from me. As long as the concubines like it, it's fine. I don't dare to ask for a reward." Ancestor Lei shook her head and said, "No. The colorful silkworm you presented is very useful to our tribe. It can be regarded as an epic-making contribution. It can greatly enrich the colors of our cloth and make it more colorful. Such a great contribution must be rewarded. How about this? I'll give you a book on silkworm rearing. It will complement each other perfectly." Ancestor Lei took out a book made of animal skin and asked a maid to give it to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua took it and was immediately overjoyed. "Thank you, concubine." Ancestor Lei's Silkworm Rearing Handbook. After use, the silk production of the territory will be increased by 20%. After receiving the reward, Ouyang Shua was very sensible. He knew that it was not good to stay here any longer. He seized the opportunity and said, "Concubine, it's getting late. I have to return to the camp outside the city. Please allow me to leave first." Ancestor Lei nodded and said, "In that case, I won't keep you. Go." "Yes," Ouyang Shua said. Under the guidance of the palace maid, he slowly left the side hall and walked out of the palace. To be continued. Chapter 132. By the time Ouyang Shua left the tribe's palace, it was already 4 in the afternoon. Because he was concerned about the progress of the camp's construction, Ouyang Shua did not stay in Yellow Emperor's city and directly left the city. By the time he returned to the camp, the entire camp had changed. Under the joint efforts of 2,000 people, the camp's wooden walls had already been completed. On top of the walls, there were soldiers patrolling back and forth. At each of the 4 corners of the camp was an arrow tower. Apart from that, there were also 2 arrow towers on both sides of the camp's main gate, which was the east gate. In front of the camp's gate, there were also 2 rows of barricades. When the guard at the gate saw Ouyang Shua, he immediately saluted. Ouyang Shua smiled and nodded in response, which immediately made the guard feel warm in his heart. Upon entering the camp, neatly arranged military tents were already set up. They were divided according to the camp's area, and between the camps, there were already drains dug. If there were any knowledgeable people, they would discover that the entire camp's layout was very orderly, in line with the way of the military. However, it was clear that Ouyang Shua was not one of them. He only felt that the camp's layout was very reasonable. Ouyang Shua handed the horse to Wang Feng and walked into the central camp's tent alone. Inside the tent, there were more than 20 players sitting, and it seemed a little crowded. When they saw Ouyang Shua enter, everyone stood up and greeted him. Ouyang Shua smiled and nodded in response. At the same time, he did not forget to use his eyes to signal Bai Hua and Feng Xiaohuang, who were sitting at the top. Bai Hua promptly helped Ouyang Shua out of his predicament. He smiled and said, "Wu, let me introduce you to the 20 players sitting here. They're the collaborators that Feng Wu and I have selected. They have all agreed to hand over their troops to us for the final battle." Ouyang Shua was startled, but he immediately understood the meaning behind Bai Hua's words. It seemed that these players still had their own concerns and did not want to cooperate with the alliance of mountains and seas like Feng Xiaohuang. They merely wanted to borrow Ouyang Shua's identity as a representative of the mutants to gain the initiative on the battlefield. They would only obey orders during the final battle. As for normal times, everyone would do their own things, and they would not even be in the same camp. Ouyang Shua was speechless. It seemed that his previous estimation was still too optimistic. There was an old saying in China, "Chinese people, 1 person is a dragon, and 3 people are a worm." Although this saying was biased, it also reflected that the China region's players were very heroic. They liked to fight alone and were not good at teamwork. From this, one could see that the members of the alliance were the most trustworthy. It seemed that after this battle, the matter of fallen Phoenix Town joining the Mountain and Sea Alliance could be officially put on the agenda. Since Feng Xiaohuang was so determined, Ouyang Shuo had no reason to reject such a powerful ally. After understanding their intentions, Ouyang Shuo no longer had the patience to deal with them. He indifferently said, "Welcome to the alliance of mountains and seas. We'll discuss the specifics later." The change in Ouyang Shuo's attitude was naturally felt by these shrewd lord players. Some of them looked embarrassed, while others were calm and collected. There were all kinds of reactions. It just so happened that the sky was already dark, and these players tactfully took their leave after greeting Ouyang Shuo. After sending off these players, Ouyang Shuo returned to his tent and gathered White Birch's group of 4 for a simple meeting. Everyone reported what they were doing to each other. Feng Xiaohuang sorted out the 20 players and said, "That batch of players just now was basically a team of 1 to 200 people with a total of 3,500 people. They were mainly saber and shield bearers and archers, with a small portion of cavalry. As for the specifics, I've just calculated that there were 2,300 saber and shield bearers, 700 archers, and 500 cavalry. If we combine them with our original troops, we have 3,000 saber and shield bearers, 1,500 archers, and 1,000 cavalry. That's a total of 5,500 people. That's the majority of the Yellow Emperor's forces." Ouyang Shuo nodded, but he didn't feel too excited. He bitterly smiled and said, "With such a small number of troops, we'll have to split them into over 20 forces. When the time comes, whether or not we'll be able to form a united force is a big question mark. Don't look at how well these people are saying that they'll obey our commands. If there's any fluctuation on the battlefield, who knows what unforeseen events might happen. In my opinion, we should maintain a complete organizational structure for our 2,000 people. As for the players who join us, we should also evaluate their credibility and rank them. Only the most reliable lords can stand with us." Feng Xiaohuang and White Birch nodded and said, "No problem. Leave this matter to the 2 of us." Ouyang Shuo naturally trusted the 2 of them, so he asked, "Are there any historical figures like generals or strategists among these players?" Ouyang Shuo's question wasn't without reason. There were over 20 king-grade summoning talismans in China, and according to the probability, at least half of them would summon generals or strategists. If they were divided into factions, there would only be 5 or 6 of them. The Mountain and Sea Alliance had 3, and excluding the Handan alliances by there should be 1 or 2 more generals or strategists. Feng Xiaohuang nodded and said, "You guessed it right. There's a historical general in Qinyan Town, Chun Tang." Chun Tang? Ouyang Shuo began to recall the information about Chun Tang in history. He hadn't been wasting his time studying history for the past half a year. He now had a general understanding of the famous generals of each dynasty. Chun Tang, courtesy name Zigong, was a famous general of the Western Han dynasty. During the reign of Emperor Yuan of Han, he was the Western region's vice-commandant. Together with the Western region's protector general Gan Yinshou, they launched a surprise attack on the Xiongnu's Zhiji Chanyu, ending the division between the north and south of the Xiongnu and stabilizing the northwest border of the Han dynasty. Those who offend the Han dynasty will be punished no matter how far away they are. These were the words Chun Tang wrote to Emperor Yuan of Han. He was appointed as the archery commandant, administrator, and marquis before passing away in Chang'an. Interestingly, this person had a lot of personal problems and had a bad reputation. When he was young, his family was poor, and he relied on begging and borrowing money for a living. When his father passed away, he didn't go home to attend the funeral and was reported for his lack of filial piety. Not only did he not become a high-ranking official, but he was also imprisoned. Even the most famous battle of his life was to exterminate the Xiongnu, and he used troops without the emperor's orders. In addition, this person was greedy and loved to make outstanding contributions. He didn't have the ability to command the bureaucracy, so he offended many people. Thus, his later years were extremely miserable. But no matter what, Chun Tang's military talent was outstanding, and he had a lot of battle experience. He could be considered a rare general. "If there's a chance, we can contact Qinyan Town," said Ouyang Shuo. Feng Xiaohuang nodded, indicating that he understood Ouyang Shua's intention. Ouyang Shua looked at the siege lion and asked, "Is there any news from Di Chen's side?" Before Ouyang Shua set off for Huangdi City, he had specially instructed the siege lion to pay attention to Di Chen's movements, so he asked this question. The siege lion shook his head and said helplessly, "Currently, we only know that the Handan Alliance is stationed at the north of Huangdi City. As for how many players have joined Di Chen's camp, we don't know yet. Since we can't use messenger pigeons, even if someone wanted to leak information, it would be difficult." Ouyang Shua nodded. It seemed that Di Chen also had capable people around him. They knew to avoid the east and south sides of the camp, and chose the north side. They also did a good job in keeping it a secret and didn't reveal anything. Ouyang Shua said, "It seems that we have to send the military intelligence department tomorrow to investigate in detail. I won't be at ease until we find out their background. On the other hand, we have to patrol our own camp and keep it a secret. We must not let Di Chen's men infiltrate." "That's right." The siege lion nodded in agreement. "The camp has been built. From tomorrow onwards, we will split up. From the information I received today, the final battle won't start so soon. During this time, everyone can go and complete some side quests. Who knows, there might be some surprises." Ouyang Shua said at the end. "Wui, have you already received the quest reward?" Baihua asked curiously. Baihua was indeed a player with the most accurate intuition. Ouyang Shua nodded and said, "Yes, a small gift. We are busy in the camp, but Brother Wui, you are going to complete quests by yourself. You are so biased." Mu Lanyue pouted. Ahem. Ouyang Shua was speechless at Mu Lanyue's naivety. He said, "My main goal in entering the city this time is to build a good relationship with the NPCs. As for the reward, it is just a pleasant surprise." Mu Lanyue was just saying it. She didn't mind and said, "Brother Wui, can you bring me along tomorrow? It's so boring staying in the camp." "Sure." Ouyang Shua agreed readily. Yay! Mu Lanyue was as happy as a little fox who had won. Ouyang Shua smiled bitterly and shook his head. He didn't expect this girl to be so two-faced. After the meeting, everyone returned to their own tents and prepared to log off. To be continued. Chapter 133. The next day, Ouyang Shua went online and practiced the Yang family spear and 8 extremities fist as usual. Wow, Brother Wui is so handsome. Mu Lanyue suddenly walked over and pretended to be infatuated. Ouyang Shua didn't pay attention to this black-bellied fellow and continued to practice. Not long after, Feng Qiuhuang Baihua and the others came online and surrounded him curiously. Ouyang Shua had no choice but to stop practicing. Brother Wui's spear technique is superb. Your cultivation technique must be very high level, right? Feng Qiuhuang asked. Ouyang Shua did not hide it and said, "Yes, this is the Emperor-level Yang family spear. I was lucky enough to find it in the market last time." Ouyang Shua turned to look at Mu Ging, who was watching from the side, and said with a smile, "Speaking of which, this spear technique is related to General Mu Ging." Mu Guiying was a bit lost in thought. Maybe it was because of the memory, but she remained silent. "Sister." Mu Lanyue walked to Mu Guiying's side and was a bit worried. Mu Guiying was startled, and her expression returned to normal. She patted Mu Lanyue's head and said with a smile, "I'm fine." Seeing that the atmosphere was a bit gloomy, the siege lion jumped out and said, "Are we going to do a mission in the city today? Is there any beauty willing to team up with me?" Bai Hua and the other two shook their heads in unison. "No way. My heart is about to break," the siege lion said exaggeratedly. Ouyang Shua was amused as he looked at the siege lion's antics and said, "Everyone will split up today. I wish everyone will reap some rewards. Yu, let's go." Okay. Mu Lanyue's mood came and went quickly. She was happy again. Once again, Ouyang Shua entered Yellow Emperor City. This time, aside from Wang Feng, there was another follower by his side. "Brother Wui, where are we going to do the mission?" Mu Lanyue asked like a curious baby. Ouyang Shua was also thinking about this. In Yellow Emperor's camp, Feng Ho, Li Mu, and the other important officials did not have anything that satisfied them. It would be hard to make any progress if he suddenly greeted them. "Yu." Ouyang Shua suddenly smiled and called Mu Lanue like an old fox. Mu Lanue was a bit confused. Do you want to take a look at the palace? The old cunning fox took out his lollipop. Okay, that place must be fun. The little fox really fell for the old fox's trick. Go! In front of the palace gate, the same guard from yesterday saw Ouyang Shua and took the initiative to ask, "Are you here to have an audience with Her Highness?" "I'll go and report it now." Ouyang Shua hurriedly shook his head and said with a smile, "No, no, no. I'm here today to have an audience with His Majesty the Yellow Emperor." The guard was startled. "All right, wait a moment." After the guard left, Mu Lanue looked at Ouyang Shua with admiration. "Big Brother Wui, you're so awesome. Even the palace guards are so polite to you." "Because I came here yesterday, so I know him," Ouyang Shua helplessly said. The guard quickly returned and said, "His Majesty invites you in." Ouyang Shua nodded and followed the guard into the palace. Along the way, Mulan looked around. She was very interested in the palace of the desolate era. This was human nature, so Ouyang Shua didn't stop it. This time, the Yellow Emperor chose to receive Ouyang Shua in the main hall. Compared to the side halls, the main hall was much grander. The ground of the main hall was paved with large gray stones. The surface was carved with pictographic patterns, but no one knew what they meant. After entering the main hall, there were 4 steps. On the left and right sides stood 2 palace guards with long spears. In front of the steps was a circular wooden arch. It was also carved with patterns, fully reflecting the architectural wisdom of the ancestors. After passing through the arch, there was the main hall. On the left and right sides were 3 small tables. The tables were very low. Ouyang Shua guessed that one had to sit cross-legged. This was already the prototype of the Shang and Zhou dynasties' etiquette. In front of the main hall, there were 2 more steps. On the top was the Yellow Emperor's throne. Behind it was a totem screen. It looked very rough and mysterious, full of a desolate aura. Even the previously lively Mulan Lanue became quiet when she saw such a lineup. The Yellow Emperor sat on the throne. He wore a long black robe with a tiger skin tied around his waist. His lower body was also in a skirt style, only reaching his knees. Behind him was a black cloak, and around his neck hung a wolf fang necklace. In the middle was a black stone. Other than that, there were no other decorations. He had bronze skin, a wide face, thick eyebrows, and big eyes. The lines of his face were very strong. He had a thick beard and loose hair. Everything about him was full of masculinity. How can a mutant be without clothes? Mulan Lanue greets your majesty. Ouyang Shua and Mulan Lanue bowed. As for Wang Feng, he had already been stopped by the guards outside the main hall. "Rise," the Yellow Emperor said in a magnetic voice. "Yesterday, I heard my beloved concubine mention you. Do you have something to report to me today?" "Your Majesty, as the mutants' representative, I have to report the basic situation of the mutant army to your Majesty. That's why I came to see you," Ouyang Shua said. Even he felt that these words were a bit awkward. The Yellow Emperor nodded. "Not bad. It's rare for you to be so reasonable. The mutant army has a total of 8,000 people. I can mobilize 2,000 at any time. I could directly command 5,000. The remaining 3,000 are not under my command. The army is mainly made up of sword and shield soldiers. There are also some archers and cavalry." When Ouyang Shua reported, he didn't forget to make things difficult for Di Chun. "How's your battle strength?" "I don't dare to say anything else, but at the very least, the 2,000 people under my command are definitely good warriors. They are ready to charge into battle for your majesty at any time." Such flattery made Ouyang Shua a bit embarrassed. Beside him, Mulan Lanue had a mocking look on her face. Although it was flattery, everyone liked to hear it. Even the Yellow Emperor couldn't avoid it. "Very good. Since that's the case, I have 2 missions for you. Are you willing to accept them?" "I'm willing to serve your majesty," Ouyang Shua said happily. Mulan Lanue's little mouth was wide open. She couldn't believe it and mumbled to herself, I received a mission just like that." Ouyang Shua didn't care about her and quickly checked the system notification. System notification. "Congratulations to player. How can a mutant be without clothes for triggering the D-rank side mission? delivering a letter. Mission background. The decisive battle is imminent. The Yellow Emperor has begun to organize the army of the various tribes. Mission requirements. Head to the Yin Emperor's camp and inform the Yin Emperor to gather at the Yellow Emperor's city. Mission reward. 200 achievement points, 400 contribution points. System notification. Congratulations to player How Can a Mutant Be without clothes for triggering the B-rank side mission. Investigation. Shareable. Mission background. The decisive battle is imminent. The Yellow Emperor wants to understand the situation of the Chiyu camp. Mission requirements. Head to the Chiyu camp and spy on the Chiyu camp's military situation. Mission reward. 400 achievement points, 1,600 contribution points. Before Ouyang Shua could react, another round of battle announcement sounded. Battle announcement. Player How Can a Mutant Be without clothes for triggering the side mission. The contribution points board will be officially activated. Please check it yourself. Friendly reminder. There are 3 ways to obtain contribution points. The first is to complete side missions, the second is to kill enemies on the battlefield, and the third is through comprehensive statistics. Battle announcement. Contribution points for killing enemies on the battlefield will be calculated as follows. Kill an ordinary soldier of the enemy camp. Reward. 10 contribution points. Kill an ordinary officer of the enemy camp. Reward. 100 contribution points. Kill an important general of the enemy camp. Reward. 1,000 contribution points. Kill the leader of the enemy camp. Reward. 20,000 contribution points. Battle campaign announcement. The rules for calculating the contribution points are as follows. After the end of the battle campaign, based on the overall performance of the players, their role in promoting the battle campaign, and their contribution to the faction, a bonus contribution points will be calculated. Battle announcement. After the battle ends, contribution points will be converted into achievement points according to the ratio of 10:1. Apart from this, according to the contribution points board, first place will be rewarded with 4,000 achievement points. Second place will be rewarded with 3,000 achievement points. Third place will be rewarded with 2,000 achievement points. Fourth to 10th place will be rewarded with 200 achievement points for every rank behind. The 11th to 20th place would be rewarded with 500 achievement points. The 21st to 30th place would be rewarded with 400 achievement points. The 31st to 40th place would be rewarded with 300 achievement points. The 41st to 50th place would be rewarded with 200 achievement points. And the 51st to 100th place would be rewarded with 100 achievement points. Below 100th place will not be rewarded with any additional achievement points. This kind of achievement point reward design was a classic pyramid. The higher one's rank, the higher the reward. Moreover, the gap between the top and bottom was huge, forcing the players to use all their strength to fight for a higher rank. Otherwise, after a battle, the difference in achievement points would be too great, which would further widen the gap in nobility. Different nobility meant different numbers of troops could be brought. This kind of battle design was a vicious cycle for the weaker players. On the contrary, for the stronger players, it was a virtuous cycle. The classic law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, survival of the fittest. After the battle announcement, Ouyang Shua's ears rang with the sound of a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player not wearing for activating the contribution points board. Reward. 500 contribution points. What a pleasant surprise. However, 500 contribution points were converted to achievement points, which was only 50 points. For Ouyang Shua's current nobility, it was simply a drop in the bucket. In this first battle, due to the limited number of troops on both sides, the amount of contribution points obtained from the battle was also limited, unless one killed the enemy's general or even the leader. If one wanted to have a big harvest, they would have to rely on the additional rewards from the contribution points board. If one could be ranked in the top 3, the reward would be very generous. Speaking of which, if the number of troops in the future battles were easily in the hundreds of thousands, then the contribution points obtained from killing the enemy would become abnormally generous. It might even surpass the additional rewards from the contribution points board. To be continued. Chapter 134. Ouyang Shuo opened the contribution ranking and saw that he was alone at the top with 500 contribution points. Behind him was a string of empty spots, waiting for other players to fill his spot. Novel of the release of the contribution ranking signified that the Zhuolu battle was on the fast track. At that moment, Dichin was trying to get in touch with the others. When he heard the announcement, he said in exasperation, F***CK. That guy is one step ahead again. Why is his luck so good every time? He was just lucky, Army Kill Ripper said from the side. No matter what, after this battle ends, I will immediately apply for a promotion to a first-class county. Let's see how he can jump around then, Di Chun said gloomily. Clearly, he couldn't get over what had happened at the auction. Isn't it too hasty? Peerless Elegance frowned. Di Chun shook his head and said, We can't wait any longer. If we wait any longer, I believe Shanghai Town will apply for a promotion. When that happens, it will be too late for regrets. We must suppress, not Wui's arrogance this time. Otherwise, we won't have the right to speak in the China region. The peerless magnificence remained silent. In her eyes, Di Chun had been messed up by Don't Say Wui recently. It was as if he had been possessed. He didn't listen to her advice at all. This was not a good sign. Ouyang Shuo walked out of the palace and found Bai Hua and the others who were still looking for missions in Yellow Emperor City. Wui, you received a mission? Bai Hua asked. Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, That's right. I just received 2 missions. One was to deliver a letter to Yin Emperor Tribe, and the other was to investigate Qiyu Tribe. The B-rank mission investigation can be shared so we can complete it together. That's great. We walked around the city, but didn't have any clues, Bai Hua said with a smile. Ouyang Shuo opened the mission interface and opened the mission sharing. System notification. Please select the shared target for the B-rank mission investigation. Friendly reminder, you cannot share it with more than 5 people. Bai Hua, Feng Qiuhuang, Magnolia Moon, and Siege Lion. System notification. The number of people sharing the mission is 4. After completing the mission, the initiator will receive a reward of 50. The 4 mission participants will receive a reward of 25. This was the benefit of sharing the mission. Although Ouyang Shuo's reward was halved, the team's reward was even more. Moreover, if the mission completion rate was very high, there would be additional rewards. The reconnaissance mission this time will be led by the Red Eagles and the Siege Lions. I will arrange for the reconnaissance team and a squadron of cavalry to work together. Ouyang Shuo said, Aren't you going to take a look yourself? The Siege Lion asked. Ouyang Shuo shook his head and said, No, with you and Red Eagle here, I'm at ease. Besides, I still have to deliver a letter to Emperor Yan's tribe. I'm too busy. All right then. After discussing the candidates for the mission, Ouyang Shuo left Bai Hua and Feng Qiuhuang behind to continue searching for side missions in Yellow Emperor City. He brought the Siege Lion and Mu Lanyue back to camp. After returning to the camp, Ouyang Shuo gave some simple instructions to Song San from the Military Intelligence Bureau and Sun Tingjiao from the 2nd Company of the Cavalry Battalion, asking them to cooperate with the Red Eagles and Siege Lions to complete the reconnaissance mission. As for Ouyang Shuo himself, he brought Mu Lanyue and the 1st Company of the Cavalry Battalion to the stronghold of the Yin Emperor Tribe, the Yin Emperor Camp. The Yin Emperor's tribe was located west of the Taiyang Mountains, about 10 kilometers away from the Yellow Emperor City. There were no paved roads between the 2 places. Weeds were lush and the mountainous terrain was rugged, making it extremely difficult to travel. Ouyang Shuo's group set off at 10:30 in the morning and only arrived at the Yin Emperor camp at 2 in the afternoon. Fortunately, they did not encounter any scouts from the Qiyu tribe along the way. The architectural style of the Yin Emperor camp was extremely similar to that of the Yellow Emperor City. When Ouyang Shuo arrived at the city gate, the guard at the gate stopped them and berated, "Who are you? Tell me your name." Ouyang Shuo cupped his hands and said loudly, "I'm the representative of the mutants. I'm here to deliver a letter to Emperor Yin on the orders of the Yellow Emperor. Please let us pass." The guard at the gate did not relax and asked, "What proof do you have?" Ouyang Shuo immediately got off his horse and handed over his identity token. The guard took the token and looked at it. It was unknown how he could distinguish the authenticity of the token, but he nodded and said, "The token is correct. You may enter the city. However, the troops you brought can only be stationed outside the city." Ouyang Shua nodded to show that he understood. This was already the norm, so he was not surprised. Ouyang Shua turned to the first company of the cavalry battalion's Li Mingliang and said, "Leader Li, find a place nearby to set up camp. Based on the time it took us to get here, I'm afraid we won't be able to make it back in time today. We'll have to spend the night in the Yin Emperor camp." "Yes, sir." Ouyang Shua brought Mu Lanyue and Wang Feng with him and followed the guards into the Yin Emperor's camp. Because it was a letter from the Yellow Emperor, the guards did not dare to be slow. They directly brought Ouyang Shua and the other two to the Yin Emperor camp's palace to see the Yin Emperor. Compared to the Yellow Emperor city's palace, the Yin Emperor camp's palace was more imposing. For a long time, the Yin Emperor's tribe had been the largest tribe in the Shinong tribe. Even though they had declined and lost to the Yellow Emperor's tribe and the Chiyu tribe, the palace they had built was still not something that a rising star like the Yellow Emperor's tribe could compare with. It had preserved the last trace of dignity and glory of the Yin Emperor's tribe. After receiving the guard's report, the Yin Emperor received the messenger, Ouyang Shua, in the main hall. Sitting on the throne in the main hall, the Yin Emperor was older. He looked to be in his 40s or 50s. Compared to the Yellow Emperor, who was in the prime of his life, he looked old. The Yin Emperor tribe respected fire. Therefore, most of the people in the tribe wore dark red hemp clothes. As for how they dyed their clothes, no one knew. Compared to the Yellow Emperor, the Yin Emperor's face was extremely handsome. It was not hard to imagine his charm when he was young. His hair was neatly combed, and even his beard was beautifully groomed. Obviously, compared to the Yellow Emperor's slovenly appearance, the Yin Emperor paid more attention to his image. The Yin Emperor's forehead was tied with a necklace made of pearls and jade. In the middle of the necklace was a slender jade stone. Although it was obvious that his hair and beard were turning white, the Yin Emperor still looked very spirited, especially his bright eyes, which seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. This former king was still trying his best to protect the dignity of the Yin Emperor tribe. On the left side of the main hall sat a woman in her 30s. She wore black hemp clothes and had long hair that went past her shoulders. In front of her chest hung a string of white ornaments made of unknown materials. On top of the ornament, there was a huge jade tablet. The most eye-catching thing was the painting on the woman's face. The painting was drawn in black and filled in with white. It was located between the eyebrows and the chin. The painting between the eyebrows was like an arrow. The arrow pointed downwards and was divided into 3 sections. The painting on the chin was like a ribbon with 5 dots in the middle, 4 black dots above, and a red dot in the middle. It looked very mysterious. Ouyang Shua guessed that this woman was the witch of the Yin Emperor tribe. Her status was second only to the Yin Emperor. How can a mutant be without clothes? Mulan Yue greets the Yin Emperor. Ouyang Shua and Mulan Yue bowed. "Dispense with the formalities. Why did the Yellow Emperor send you here?" The Yin Emperor said gently. Ouyang Shua took out the letter and said respectfully, "The decisive battle is imminent. The Yellow Emperor requests the Yin Emperor to gather the troops and head to Yellow Emperor City to meet up with the army. This is the Yellow Emperor's handwritten letter." Ouyang Shua handed the letter to the guard. Flame Emperor took the letter from the guard and opened it. After a moment of silence, he said, "I understand the Yellow Emperor's intention. Tomorrow, I will lead the troops to Yellow Emperor City. You could travel with the army." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Ouyang Shua and Mu Lanyue heard the system notification that they had completed the mission. "Congratulations to player How Can a Mutant Be without clothes for completing the D-Rank side mission. Letter delivery. Special reward, 200 achievement points and 400 contribution points. Because this mission was accepted by Ouyang Shua and Mu Lanyue, it was not a shared mission. Therefore, both of them received the same reward. This way, Mu Lanyue became the second player to enter the contribution ranking. This made the black-bellied man laugh. At this moment, a 7 or 8-year-old girl ran out from the back of the hall. She was even younger than the Yellow Emperor tribe's Xinyuan Mei. However, she was prettier and more elegant. She had a pair of big, lively eyes and exquisite facial features. She looked cute and cute. She also wore a garland on her head and a pair of red shoes on her feet. She dressed herself up beautifully. "Girl, can't you see that father is receiving guests? Why are you so rash?" The Yin Emperor looked at the little girl and pretended to be angry. The little girl was not afraid of the Yin Emperor at all. She ran in front of the Yin Emperor and sat on his lap. She grabbed the Yin Emperor's beard and said, "Father, you don't even want to play with me." The Yin Emperor doted on his youngest daughter very much. He said helplessly, "Can't you see that father is busy? I'll play with you later, okay? Girl, be good." The girl turned to look at Ouyang Shuo and said angrily, "You're a bad person. You stole my father." How could Ouyang Shuo be angry with this girl who had left a strong mark in the legends? She was also the legendary elite guard. He took out a doll from his storage bag and said with a smile, "It's my fault for provoking the little princess. This is a small gift for Her Highness. I hope Her Highness won't be angry." When the girl saw the doll in Ouyang Shuo's hands, her eyes widened. The little girl had never seen such an exquisite toy before. She immediately fell in love with it. What surprised Ouyang Shuo was that the girl did not run over to take the gift. Instead, she turned to look at the Yin Emperor. It was obvious that the girl was much more sensible than Xin Yuan Mei. Seeing her father nod his head, the little girl happily jumped down from the Flame Emperor and jogged over to Ouyang Shuo. She took the doll that Ouyang Shuo handed over and said in a crisp voice, "You are a good person. This little girl forgives you." Ouyang Shuo smiled. "It's good that the Lord likes it." Chapter 135. P.S. There is a guarantee at night. Chapter 2. After the girl received Ouyang Shuo's gift, a system notification rang in Ouyang Shuo's ears. System notification. Congratulations to player not wearing anything for obtaining the affection of the Yin Emperor's tribe's girl. You have triggered the C-rank side quest, Redemption. Quest background. Yin Emperor was about to set off for Huang Emperor's city. The girl took advantage of Yin Emperor's absence to sneak out of the city. She went to the Hutuo River to the west of Yin Emperor's camp to play and unfortunately drowned. Quest requirement. Protect the girl and help her safely return to Yin Emperor's camp. Quest reward. 300 achievement points, 800 battle contribution points. Ouyang Shuo was startled. He didn't expect the legendary Jingwei to fill the sea to appear in such a form. There were many stories about Jingwei filling the sea. Although they were all fictional, it was enough to shock people's hearts. It was said that the sun god Yin Emperor had a daughter, a little girl. The people of the Central Plains called children. This little girl, everyone called her girl. Yin Emperor was in charge of the sun. Every morning, he would go to the East Sea to command the sun to rise. He wouldn't return home until the sun set. The girl was a sensible child. When her father wasn't home, she played by herself. She often wore a pair of red shoes and ran to the fields. She put many flowers on her head and dressed herself up beautifully. She watched the fiery red sun rise from the east. She happily bathed in the sunlight and admired the vitality around her. Everything grew under the sun. The birds and beasts rejoiced under the sun. She was very proud because the light and warmth of the earth was brought by her father. Sometimes, she would run to the edge of the East Sea to watch the sunrise. When she saw the multicolored light shining in all directions and a red sun jumping out of the sea, she was extremely happy. So she really wanted to see where the sun rose outside the East Sea. But the girl was too young. Yin Emperor couldn't bring her there, because the place where the sun rose was billions of miles away from the East Sea, the ultimate ruins. That place was very, very hot. Children couldn't stand it. The girl was always angry because of this. The mysterious ultimate ruins were too attractive. Once, she didn't listen. After her father left, she jumped into the East Sea and swam to the ultimate ruins. She swam and swam. At first, she was very happy and swam energetically. Then she swam further and further. Unexpectedly, a gust of wind came and engulfed the girl. She sank into the East Sea and never came back. However, the The girl's soul did not die. She hated the evil waves in the sea. Her fairy turned into a bird. The wildflowers on her head turned into patterns on her forehead, and the little red shoes on her feet turned into red claws. She swore to fill up the East Sea. In order to strengthen their own power, the Jingwei and the sea petrel became partners and produced offspring so that their spirit could be passed down from generation to generation. They continued to reclaim the sea until it was flat. The Jingwei and the sea petrel's children. The female was like the Jingwei, and the male was like the petrel. The Jingwei bird kept bringing pebbles and branches from the West Mountain and throwing them towards the East Sea. It would throw it in the morning, at night, today, and tomorrow. Even if it encountered a violent storm, it would still travel through the wind and rain. Sometimes it was too close to the surface of the water, and the waves swallowed it again. However, it did not give up, and new Jingwei birds came to fill the sea. The god, Ihai King Jingwei Jin. The water god Gong Gong admired Jingwei's spirit. So he sent a flood to wash the sand from the highland into the sea, turning the seawater yellow. People called the northern part of the East Sea the Yellow Sea. When the sea realized it was in danger of being filled up, people took measures to push the sand to the shore. The sand settled on the shore and formed a beach. When the seabed thickened and became bigger, people surrounded it and transformed it into fertile farmland. The people could not forget that this piece of land was obtained by Jingwei. They taught their children and grandchildren to love and protect the birds for generations to come. They learned the spirit of Jingwei and worked hard towards the goal that they had set. Ouyang Shua's heart ached for this legendary girl. Since he had received the mission, he had to make arrangements. It was 3 p.m. when Ouyang Shua came out of the Yin Emperor's palace. This trip was truly worth it. Not only did he see the legendary Yin Emperor, he was lucky enough to meet the girl. He might even be able to change the girl's fate. Brother Wui, what are we going to do next? Mu Lanhua asked. Ouyang Shua did not have a plan. Let's walk around. Since we are here, let's see if we can get any side missions. Okay. Unfortunately, Ouyang Shua's luck ran out. At 5 p.m, the two did not get anything. They could only leave the Yin Emperor's camp and head to the temporary camp outside the city. At this time, Li Mingliang had already finished building the camp with the cavalry team. Because they were only staying for one night, it was not as luxurious as the camp outside the Yellow Emperor city. Mu Lanhua even had to share a tent with Ouyang Shua. Luckily, players did not need to sleep in tents at night. They could just go offline and rest. Because the time flow of the battle map and the main map was 10:1, and the time flow of the main map and the real world was 1:1. This meant that when players went offline in the battle map, it might not be the morning of the next day in reality. For example, 2 days had passed in the battle map, but only about 4 hours had passed in reality. This meant that when Ouyang Shua woke up from the game capsule, it was only 1 a.m. He could only stay in the real world for less than an hour before he had to go online again. This was because the battle map was already the morning of the next day. In his previous life, there were many muddle-headed Overlord players who did not notice the changes in the time flow. They foolishly waited for 8 to 8 hours in reality before going online again. In the end, they realized that 3 to 4 days had passed in the battle map. It was naturally a tragedy. For Gaia to maintain such a ratio of time flow in the battle map, it took up a lot of memory. Therefore, it was not suitable to promote it in the main map. Even the battle map would be closed immediately after the mission ended. Ouyang Shua happened to be a little hungry, so he walked out of his bedroom and went to the kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles. With his culinary skills, even simple noodles looked, smelled, and tasted good. At this moment, Sun Xiaoya suddenly walked out of her room, giving Ouyang Shua a fright. "Why are you up at this time?" Ouyang Shua asked. Sun Xiaoya had just come out of the game and said in a daze, "To the toilet." Suddenly, her nose twitched as she smelled the fragrance of the noodles. She said, "It smells so good. I'm hungry too." Ouyang Shua shook his head. He was speechless at this glutton. He said, "Go to the toilet first. I'll go to the kitchen to cook another bowl for you." "Thank you, Sun Xiaoya did not stand on ceremony. After the noodles were cooked, Sun Xiaoya asked as she ate. Why are you up at this time? Have you heard of the Battle of Zhuolu? Of course. Who wouldn't know of such sensational news? You participated? Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, That's right. As the time flow in the battle map is different from the main map, I logged off at this time. I'll be back online in a while. Sun Xiaoya clearly did not want to let Ouyang Shuo off just like that. She asked in a gossipy manner, Not bad. You are qualified to participate in the Battle of Zhuolu. In the entire China region, only about 100 territories are qualified. Sai, be honest. What's your name in-game? Ouyang Shuo shook his head. He wasn't a fool. Why would he tell the lass? How arrogant. Fine, I won't say it if you don't want to. Sun Xiaoya's resentment was not small. However, her emotions came and went quickly. She asked, Sai, is the battle map fun? It's the Wildlands. Have you seen the legendary Yin Huang Emperor? Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, I have. Not only the Yin Emperor and Huang Emperor, but even Ancestor Lei and Girl. The atmosphere of the Wildlands is indeed shocking. Sun Xiaoya's face was full of envy. After eating supper, Ouyang Shuo came back online just in time. In the tent, Mu Lanyue was still fast asleep. Ouyang Shuo had already reminded her before, so he was naturally not worried that Mu Lanyue would miss the time. Walking out of the tent, he saw that the Yin Emperor camp had already begun to gather troops not far away. The Yin Emperor had mobilized a total of 30,000 troops this time. They were mainly warriors, and they used weapons made of stone. There were all kinds of weapons, including knives, spears, axes, and battle axes. Do not underestimate such weapons. Their lethality was extremely shocking. If one was stabbed, there was basically no cure. They could only bleed to death. Other than that, there were also a small number of archers. Of course, they used the simplest single wooden bow. Li Mingliang walked over from the side and said, Sir, just now the Yin Emperor camp sent someone to inform us that the army will set off at 9 in the morning. They want us to prepare. Ouyang Shuo nodded and said, Mingliang, I have a mission for you. Sir, please speak. The Yin Emperor has a daughter called Nuwa. In these 2 days, take a few soldiers who are good at swimming and stay in the Yin Emperor camp. Once you discover that Nuwa has secretly left the city, immediately follow her and protect her. Do you understand? Ouyang Shuo said solemnly. Li Mingliang was confused. He did not understand when a Yin Emperor could calculate and predict other people's whereabouts. However, out of trust and respect for the Yin Emperor, Li Mingliang did not ask. Instead, he said straightforwardly, Don't worry, sir. I promise to complete the mission. That's good. After you complete the mission, immediately return to the Yellow Emperor city and meet up with the main army. The way I see it, the decisive battle will happen within this week. We can't miss it. Understood. At this moment, Mu Lanyue walked out of the tent and said in a crisp voice, Brother Wui, are we leaving? I can hear the commotion outside. Yes, we'll leave immediately. All right. Ouyang Shuo ordered the troops to break camp, pack up, and hurry to meet up with the Yin Emperor camp. When the Yin Emperor saw Ouyang Shuo's group, he did not say anything and directly asked them to join the main army. To be continued. Chapter 136. At 2 in the afternoon, Ouyang Shuo followed the Yin Emperor's army back to Yellow Emperor City. The Yellow Emperor led the ministers to welcome the Yin Emperor's party outside the city. Ouyang Shuo did not join in their greetings. He left the group and headed to the camp on the west side of the city. On the way back, Ouyang Shuo received a system notification that another side quest investigation had been completed. He received 200 achievement points and 800 contribution points. Camp tent. What's the situation with the Chi-Yu tribe? Ouyang Shuo asked. The Siege Lion and the Red Eagle looked at each other and said, Let me explain. The opposing player camp is divided into 3 groups: the Spring and Autumn Alliance, the Iron Blood Alliance, and the Scattered People Alliance. Among them, the Spring and Autumn Alliance is the strongest. They have about 5,000 people under their command, similar to ours. The Iron Blood Alliance is supported by wolves and is slightly weaker. They have less than 2,000 people. The remaining troops have been taken in by the Scattered People Alliance. Ouyang Shuo was not too concerned about the player camp. He asked, "What about the Chiyu tribe? Did you find out? Because of the city gate control, we could not enter the Chiyu stronghold. Last night, under the cover of night, we kidnapped 2 patrolling soldiers of the Chiyu tribe outside the village and obtained some information from them. It is said that the Chiyu tribe has 81 brothers. All of them are tall and strong. The Chiyu tribe had a total of more than 80,000 warriors, and a large portion of them were already using bronze weapons. Compared to the Yellow Emperor tribe's stone tools, they are much more advanced," the siege lion said. Ouyang Shuo nodded. Compared to the martial law in Yellow Emperor City, it was not hard to imagine the situation in the Chiyu stronghold. In fact, when he received the system notification that the mission reward was only the most basic reward, he knew that the mission completion rate was not high. Ouyang Shuo did not dwell on this issue. He told everyone about what he saw in the Yin Emperor's camp. During this time, Bai Hua and Feng Xiaohuang also received side quests in Yellow Emperor City. However, they were the lowest E-rank side quests with limited rewards. As they chatted, Bai Hua suddenly said with a smile, "Wooey, guess what? This morning, Di Chun went to Yellow Emperor City to ask for food, but was rejected." "Serves him right," the siege lion said gloatingly. Ouyang Shuo's heart stirred. He asked, "Are the other players also starting to run out of food? They all know that we have military ration pills, right?" "That's right. It's just as you expected. Most players have neglected the problem of logistics, thinking that the faction will solve it for them. The 20 or so players who are willing to cooperate with us also want us to lend them some military ration pills." "What do you think?" White Birch asked. Ouyang Shuo chuckled and said, "It's very simple. Only the players who agree to hand over their troops to us will be able to receive our help. Otherwise, you can go hunt by yourself. Wouldn't this be akin to looting a burning house? I'm afraid that if we do this, they will be even more unconvinced, which will be detrimental to our future cooperation," Bai Hua said hesitantly. Ouyang Shuo shook his head and said, "Cooperating with them is a one-time deal to begin with. Once the battle was over, there is no hope of working together again. As long as we don't form an alliance, everything else is meaningless." "All right, we'll do as you say." Bai Hua made up his mind. Over the next 4 or 5 days, leaders of small and medium-sized tribes led their troops to Yellow Emperor City. Depending on the size of the tribe, the number of troops they brought would vary. Generally speaking, the number of troops of a medium-sized tribe would be around 2,000. The troops of small tribes were somewhat uneven, ranging from 4 to 500 to thousands of people. No matter which tribe it was, they were basically fighting with all their might. From this, it could be seen how much pressure the Chiyu tribe brought to the Yin Huang Tribal Alliance. The allied forces of these small and medium-sized tribes totaled more than 40,000 people, all stationed on the south side of Yellow Emperor City. As for the east side of Yellow Emperor City, the 30,000 troops of the Yin Emperor tribe were stationed. The two sides formed a triangular formation to protect Yellow Emperor City and face the threat of the Chiyu stronghold. During this period of time, Di Chun and the others were busy hunting and stockpiling rations. They simply didn't have the time or energy to go to Yellow Emperor City to find side missions. On the other hand, Ouyang Shuo and the others had the advantage of good timing and geographical location. They continuously completed all kinds of side missions and gained quite a lot of rewards. Especially after the small and medium-sized tribes had gathered in Yellow Emperor City, they also had the opportunity to receive side missions. Ouyang Shuo arranged for everyone to split up and take the initiative. As for the Chiyu camp, they were also limited by the problem of rations, and the problem was even more serious. The Yellow Emperor City had been built for a long time, so they had some rations in reserve. The players had the opportunity to exchange for some rations in case of emergency. The Chiyu stronghold was different. It had not been built for a long time, and the crops they planted had not yet reached harvest season. They were already short of rations, so how could they have any surplus to exchange for the players? This caused Lord Chunxin and the others quite a bit of trouble. At this time, the dragon-seeking acupuncture points fully displayed his mission maniac nature. While Lord Chunshin and the others were busy, he crazily swept through the side missions of the Chiyu camp. The amount of battle contribution points he obtained was even more than Ouyang Shaw, which was really enviable. As a result, the entire battle contribution ranking was dominated by the members of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. The others could only stare helplessly. At this point, the influence of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas was deeply rooted, and it was hard to shake it. Rank, name, battle contribution points, first place. Dragon-seeking acupuncture points, 7,500 points, second place. How do you have no clothes, 4,200 points, third place. Feng Qiuhuang, 2,400 points, fourth place. Bai Hua, 2,200 points, fifth place. Magnolia Moon, 1,800 points, sixth place. Siege Lion, 1,400 points, seventh place. Sparkle, 1,000 points, eighth place. Xiongba, 800 points, ninth place. Wolf Warrior, 600 points, 10th place. Emperor Chun, 400 points. Sparkle was the leader of Qingyan Town and had a historical general, Chun Tang. With Ouyang Shua's financial support, he had been doing very well. The most pitiful was Lord Chunshin. As the leader of the Spring and Autumn Alliance, he had spent all his money on gathering rations and had not even entered the top 10 rankings. During this time, Li Mingliang had successfully returned. The girl had indeed sneaked out of the Yin Emperor's camp to play in the Hutuo River. However, with Li Mingliang secretly watching over her, she had safely returned to the Yin Emperor's camp. When the Yin Emperor heard the news, he proudly rushed to Ouyang Shua's camp to express his gratitude. On this day, Ouyang Shua received a notice to go to the Yellow Emperor's palace to participate in a military conference. Ouyang Shua's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the day of the final battle had arrived. When he entered the main hall of the palace, it was already filled with people. The Yellow Emperor was sitting on the throne, and the Yin Emperor was sitting beside him, slightly behind him. Although the Yin Emperor had been defeated by the Yellow Emperor at the Battle of Lake Spring and had given up his position as the leader of the tribal alliance, his position in the alliance was still very respected. On the left side of the main hall sat the important officials of the Yellow Emperor's tribe, such as the Wind Empress and Li Mu. On the right side sat the leaders of the other medium-sized tribes. As for the small tribes, they were not qualified to participate in the military conference. Seeing Ouyang Shua walk in, everyone looked at him curiously. There was no lack of contempt in their eyes. Ouyang Shua ignored them and sat on the last seat on the right side, remaining silent. However, the Yin Emperor and the Yellow Emperor, who were sitting on the upper seats, nodded slightly in acknowledgement when they saw Ouyang Shua enter. The Yellow Emperor looked around and said, "My ministers, Qiyu is cruel and greedy. He does not follow the rules of an official, nor does he abide by justice. He led his troops on a western expedition, intending to occupy the Central Plains and replace us. In such a critical moment, we must work together to resist the strong enemy. As the saying goes, a just cause enjoys much support, while an unjust one finds little support. With your help, I firmly believe that we will win this battle. Feng Qing, introduce us to the situation of the enemy." As the Prime Minister of the Yellow Emperor's tribe, the Wind Empress was actually less than 30 years old. He was handsome and had an elegant demeanor. He was extremely intelligent and was truly the #1 strategist by the Yellow Emperor's side. The Wind Empress stood up and bowed to the Yin Emperor and the Yellow Emperor. "Yes, Your Majesty. Excluding the mutant troops, we have a total of 120,000 soldiers. In terms of numbers, we surpass the Qiyu tribe. The enemy only has 80,000 people. However, the bronze weapons of the Qiyu tribe are sharper than ours. Overall, we are evenly matched. In addition, the Qiyu army has come from afar, so logistical supplies are a problem. They are plowing the fields and growing food around the Qiyu village. It's almost time for the grain to ripen. If we let the Qiyu tribe harvest smoothly, then this battle will be long. Therefore, we must take the initiative to attack before the enemy harvests their grain. We must take advantage of their lack of food to destroy them in one fell swoop." The Yellow Emperor nodded. "My beloved subjects' words make sense. What do you all think?" The Yellow Emperor's gaze paused on the Flame Emperor. The Flame Emperor understood and said, I second it. I second it. Li Mu and the other officials of the Yellow Emperor's tribe said, I second it. The leaders of the medium-sized tribe said. The Yellow Emperor was pleased and said with a smile, Good. Then we'll launch the attack in 3 days. Do you have any suggestions? Ouyang Shuo was startled. He didn't expect the Yellow Emperor to ask for his opinion. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo was no longer an ignorant person. He didn't panic even when a big shot like the Yellow Emperor suddenly asked him. He calmly stood up and bowed to the Yin Emperor and the Yellow Emperor. He slowly said, Your Majesty, I don't dare to speak carelessly about military matters. There's only one condition. As the representative of the mutants, I have some understanding of the mutant armies. Although the mutant armies are lacking in numbers, they are well equipped and not to be underestimated. I suggest that during the battle, the mutant armies of both sides should be placed opposite each other. Using the mutant armies to fight against the mutant armies is the best strategy. The Yellow Emperor was also startled. The reason why he asked was because Ouyang Shuo's previous performance left a deep impression on him. He just wanted to give it a try. He didn't expect that Ouyang Shuo would really have a countermeasure. He couldn't help but be happy and said, This is a good plan. I'll do as you say. Thank you, Your Majesty. Chapter 137. Before the army set off, the Yellow Emperor Alliance held a grand ceremony. The altar was located on the outskirts of the Yellow Emperor city and was made of huge stone slabs. The altar was square and 81 meters long. It was divided into 5 levels, and its surface area decreased with each level. There was only one flight of stairs on the south side. There were 80 steps leading to the 4th level of the altar. 2 large cowhide drums stood on both sides of the stairs. The 4th level of the altar was where the main ceremony took place. 4 huge torches stood on each of the 4 corners. Apart from that, there were also 2 large cowhide drums on both sides of the south side of the stairs. The 5th level of the altar was the most mysterious. It was 5 meters tall and shaped like the 8 trigrams. There was a stone slab at the top of each corner with a scroll full of witchcraft characters hanging from it. On the east and west sides of the altar were the totem flags of various tribes, including tigers, leopards, jackals, and wolves. On the left and right sides of the south side were the flags of the Yellow Emperor tribe and the Yin Emperor tribe. As for the players' flags, only Ouyang Shuo, who was the representative of the mutants, had the right to place the flag of the Shanghai town on the east side. After Ouyang Shuo placed the flag on the east side, he heard a system notification. System notification. Congratulations to player, don't say you don't have clothes. The Shanghai town's Lord flag has been blessed by the Yellow Emperor tribe's altar. It has gained a territorial characteristic, God's protection, increases territorial defense by 10%. Ouyang Shuo was overjoyed. He immediately told Wang Feng, who was standing next to him, to remember to take back the flag after the ceremony and hang it in the middle of the city tower. Around the altar, there was a spacious area. The Yellow Emperor tribe's army of 50,000 lined up on the south side of the altar. The Yin Emperor tribe's army of 30,000 lined up on the west side of the altar. The small and medium-sized tribe's army of 40,000 lined up on the east side of the altar. As for the 8,000 mutants, they lined up on the north side of the altar. More than 100,000 soldiers surrounded the altar in a dense manner, looking extremely spectacular. The auspicious hour had arrived. The ceremony officially began. The shamans of the Yellow Emperor tribe presided over the ceremony. It was already 9 in the morning when the entire process was completed. Then, the Yellow Emperor read out the declaration of war against the Qiyu tribe. Finally, it was the grand dance ceremony. The shamans led the women of the tribe. They wore colorful makeup and danced, singing songs and chanting forbidden spells. The warriors around them followed the rhythm of the songs and danced for battle. It was a spectacular scene. The spectating players were shocked. Regardless of whether it was the shaman dance or the battle matrix dance, they were both incredibly simple. They just had to swing their arms repeatedly and jump left and right with the rhythm. However, Only when one was truly there could one feel the power of the wilderness. It was rough and mysterious. Only then could one experience the wisdom of the ancient ancestors. It was simple and immortal. This trip was truly worth it, Bai Hua exclaimed from the side. That's right. Even if we don't get any rewards in the end, it's worth it to personally experience the ancient sacrificial ceremony. Feng Qiuhuang echoed. Ouyang Shuo, on the other hand, wasn't as sentimental as these two beauties. He smilingly said, Are you satisfied with this? There's more to come. Towards Ouyang Shuo's lack of understanding, the two beauties very tacitly gave him a dirty look. After the ceremony, the Yellow Emperor raised an army of 120,000 and set off for the wilderness of Zhuolu, heading straight for Qiyu village. The Yellow Emperor's tribes, 50,000 soldiers, formed the center. The Yin Emperor's tribes, 30,000 soldiers, formed the left wing, and the small and medium tribes, 40,000 soldiers, formed the right wing. As for the 8,000 mutants, they formed the rightmost side of the right wing. The Yellow Emperor's tribe's center army had totems of bears, wolves, leopards, eagles, dragons, owls, and other beasts. They were the Yellow Emperor's tribe's secret weapon. As the mutants' representative, Ouyang Shuo had the authority to arrange the formation of the mutants. He arranged for the Mountain and Sea Alliance's 2,000 people to be in the innermost area, while the 3,000 people of the Allied army were on the outermost area. Di Chen's army was on the outermost area. The innermost area seemed dangerous, but it was beneficial for them to fight the Qiyu tribe soldiers and earn contribution points. On the other hand, the outermost area had to fight the Qiyu tribe's mutant army face to face. Although Di Chen gritted his teeth at Ouyang Shuo, he could only swallow his anger. In the ancient times, there weren't many strategies when it came to marching and fighting. Basically, they were all straightforward. Both sides agreed on a location and set up their battle formation. With a single command, the warriors of both sides charged forward and engaged in close combat without any fancy moves. At most, they would use the weather to their advantage, such as rainstorms or droughts. Previously, the Yellow Emperor's tribe had used the flood to destroy the Qiyu city. It was considered a relatively high-end strategy. The Qiyu village was less than 10 kilometers away from the Yellow Emperor's city. When the various tribes' troops gathered in the Yellow Emperor's city, Qiyu had already found out. Today's large-scale battle formation couldn't escape the Qiyu tribe's detection. With Qiyu's temper, how could he tolerate such provocation? He immediately gathered his troops and rushed out of the Qiyu village, determined to fight the Yellow Emperor and Yin Emperor. The two sides' armies of more than 200,000 unexpectedly met in the Zhuolu wilderness. They were less than a kilometer apart. The horizontal formation stretched for several miles, with no end in sight. The Yellow Emperor stood on the chariot and shouted, Qiyu, today is the day you die. Qiyu didn't want to be outdone. He roared, Yellow Emperor, don't try to win with words. Who is the overlord of the Central Plains will be decided in today's battle. Just wait to submit to me. When the time comes, I'll spare your life. The 81 brothers standing beside Qiyu burst into laughter, mocking him to the extreme. The Flame Emperor couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at the Yellow Emperor and said, Yellow Emperor, give the order. The Yellow Emperor nodded. He raised a sharp stone sword in his hand and swung it forward, shouting, Kill! Kill! The warriors of both sides roared and rushed to the other side. The short distance of kilometer took less than 2 minutes before the two sides collided. In an instant, flesh and blood flew everywhere, forming a river. If one looked down from the sky, they would see that the two torrents were tangling with each other on the several miles long battlefront. Compared to the simple and direct battles between tribes, the battles between the mutant armies were much more skillful. The cavalry took the lead in charging, followed by the saber and shield soldiers, and then the archers. After the two sides clashed, Ouyang Shuo kept an eye on them. He ordered Zhang Liao to lead the cavalry of 500 to avoid the mutant armies and directly penetrate the Qiyu tribe diagonally across from them. They would coordinate with the allied forces in charge. He ordered Mu Ging to organize the archers and cover the cavalry's charge. In this way, Di Chun and his allies were fighting hard against Xiong Ba and his people, while Ouyang Shuo and his people were earning contribution points crazily. If it weren't for the fact that killing mutant soldiers could also earn contribution points, Ouyang Shuo thought that Di Chun would go crazy. The well-equipped cavalry, under the double cover of the archers and allied forces, unexpectedly tore an opening in the Qiyu tribe's left flank. The 50 heavy armored cavalry at the front were like beasts in the world, tearing the enemies in front of them into pieces like an arrow. Lin Yi, who was leading the charge, was covered in blood, like a demon from hell. The Qiyu tribe's warriors were famous for their bravery, but they had never seen an army like this. After a little resistance, they all shivered and didn't dare to get close. Just like that, the 500 cavalry shuttled back and forth in the Qiyu tribe's left flank, as if there was no one there. Seeing this opportunity, the Yellow Emperor decisively ordered Chang Xian to lead 5,000 people to reinforce the right flank, trying to break through the Qiyu tribe's left flank in one fell swoop. With Chang Xian's reinforcements, Zhang Liao's cavalry was even more proficient. Compared to Lin Yi, Zhang Liao's strategic foresight and knowledge were clearly superior. He ordered his troops not to be greedy, not to fight passionately, and to focus on destroying the enemy's main force. As soon as the enemy showed signs of regrouping, they would immediately disperse, not giving the enemy a chance to regroup. Seeing Ouyang Shuo's troops on the battlefield, Di Chun and Lord Chunshin weren't idiots. While the mutant armies could earn contribution points in a civil war, the losses were too high, and the gains didn't make up for the losses. Both sides unexpectedly stopped fighting, each leading their own troops to charge into the enemy's army, harvesting contribution points without interfering with each other. Ouyang Shuo stood at the side, shaking his head as he saw the mutant army's strange state. As expected, these big forces' representatives weren't easy to deal with. They weren't people he could easily control. He only had the advantage this time because of his identity as a representative of the mutants. Lord Chunshin and Wolf Warrior led the mutant army, just in time to intercept Chang Xian's reinforcements. For a moment, the battlefield was once again in a stalemate. Since the mutant army had stopped fighting, Ouyang Shuo decisively ordered the rest of the mutant army to advance and coordinate with the cavalry to kill the Qiyu tribe's left wing. The whole battlefield was like a chess game, interlocking with each other. Ouyang Shuo's right wing took the initiative, and in the end, it slowly caused a chain reaction, and the Yellow Emperor tribe began to gradually take the initiative. The two armies fought for a whole day, and only stopped fighting in the evening. The originally lush green plains had already been dyed red with blood. Broken arms and limbs were everywhere. Broken sabers, spears, axes, and battle axes were everywhere. Under the setting sun, the scene looked even more tragic. Bai Hua, Mulan Yue, and the other girls couldn't stand the bloody battlefield any longer and had long retreated to the rear. Even Ouyang Shuo himself, although he had experienced many bandit raids before, was not used to the scene in front of him. When retreating, Di Chun passed by Ouyang Shuo and said coldly, "Brother Wui, good plan, I admire you." Ouyang Shuo smiled and said casually, "Thank you for your praise, Brother Di Chun. I will truthfully report Brother Di Chun's contributions to the Yellow Emperor during the military meeting tonight." Di Chun's expression froze, and then he remembered Ouyang Shuo's special privileges. He coldly snorted, turned around, and left without looking back. To be continued. Chapter 138. P.S. There will be a second update at night. Ouyang Shuo returned to his tent and listened to the casualty reports. Although they had the upper hand in the battle during the day, they had still suffered heavy casualties. Of the 2,000 soldiers under the direct command, more than 200 had died. The cavalry at the front had suffered the greatest losses. The 3,000 allied troops had also suffered heavy casualties. In the battle against the mutants, they had lost more than 400 people. Some of the unlucky minor lords had become commanders without an army. Of course, the ones with the greatest casualties were Di Chun's 2,000 allied troops, and the 1,000 unaffiliated players. Di Chin's side had lost more than 400 people, and the unaffiliated players were almost crippled. These unaffiliated players had fought alone and were the best candidates for cannon fodder in such a large-scale battle. After the battle, the unaffiliated players realized that the battlefield wasn't a place for them to show off. They all came to Ouyang Shuo and expressed their willingness to be reorganized by the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. Ouyang Shuo chuckled and calmly accepted them, adding them to the casualties of the Allied troops. As for the direct command, he absolutely wouldn't allow these people to infiltrate it. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Ouyang Shuo received a notice to attend a military conference in the central tent. The people sitting in the tent were basically the same people who had attended the military conference last time. However, the way they looked at Ouyang Shuo was different. The powerful battle strength displayed by the mutants couldn't help but raise their eyebrows. The Yellow Emperor sat in the middle and said, "Although we had the upper hand in today's battle, the main force of the Qiyu tribe is still intact. It will be very difficult to eliminate them. Does anyone have a good plan?" A leader of a medium-sized tribe stood up and said, "Your Majesty, since we've gained the advantage on the right flank and almost destroyed the enemy's left flank, breaking one finger is better than injuring 10 fingers. This humble subject suggests that we continue to attack the enemy's left flank tomorrow and seize their weakness. We'll kill them in one blow." Ouyang Shuo was startled and slightly shook his head. The Yellow Emperor had actually been observing Ouyang Shuo. Seeing him shake his head, he asked, "You've made a great contribution today. After the battle, I will reward you handsomely. What do you think of the plan just now?" Ouyang Shuo hurriedly stood up and bowed. "Reporting to your Majesty. Today, we destroyed the enemy's left flank. Tomorrow, they will certainly transfer troops to the left flank. They won't leave any openings for us." The Yellow Emperor nodded. "Then what do you think? The number of the enemy's troops is limited. Since they want to reinforce the left flank, they will inevitably weaken other areas. The Central Army was the foundation and would not be moved easily. The most likely way was to transfer the right wing of the army. This gave us an opportunity to take advantage of. Therefore, I suggest that in tomorrow's battle, our right flank should focus on defense. We should ambush the cavalry on the left flank and use the same tactic to destroy the enemy's right flank in one fell swoop. The enemy's left and right flanks have been damaged. Even if the center of the army is unharmed, it is enough for us to establish a strategic advantage. Before Ouyang Shuo came here, he specially consulted Zhu Shou. It was Zhu Shou who told him about this plan. Otherwise, his original intention would be the same as the leader from before, to completely destroy the entire path in one go. "Brilliant plan," the Wind Empress said loudly as she looked at Ouyang Shuo with eyes filled with admiration. The Yellow Emperor also nodded in satisfaction. "Not bad. Attack when the enemy is unprepared." Receiving the Yellow Emperor's approval, Ouyang Shuo continued. "In addition, in order to prevent the Qiyu tribe from imitating our strategy today and arranging for the mutant army to attack our right flank, we must strictly order our mutant army to entangle the enemy tomorrow and not give them an opportunity to take advantage of." At this time, Changxian stood up and said loudly, "Your Majesty, this humble servant has something to say. Please speak, my beloved subject." "Your Majesty, during the battle today, I was ordered to lead 5,000 troops to reinforce the right flank. We originally had the opportunity to completely destroy the enemy's left flank. But because the enemy's mutant army suddenly interfered, we failed at the last moment. The root of the problem was our mutant army's dereliction of duty and did not properly restrain the enemy. Therefore, this humble servant greatly agrees with not saying nothing suggestion just now. This humble servant suggests that we deploy a supervisory unit to supervise the mutant army's battle." Changxian's words were both true and an excuse for his defeat during the day. Imperceptibly, he had given Ouyang Shuo a great assist. In this way, both Di Chun and Lord Chun Shun had fallen into Ouyang Shuo's trap and could not escape. The Yellow Emperor was also very dissatisfied with Di Chen's actions today. He nodded and said, "Let's do as you say. Tomorrow, you will lead 5,000 troops to guard the right flank. First, strengthen the defense of the right flank, and second, supervise the mutant army and make sure they follow orders." Understood. After the military conference, Ouyang Shuo happily walked out of the central tent. Back in the tent, General Ouyang Shuo reported the results of the conference to Bai Hua and the others. "Brother Wui, you're so naughty." Milan Yu giggled. "What does it have to do with me?" "This is all the master's plan," Ouyang Shuo said innocently. Milan Yu didn't care. She smiled charmingly and said, "I don't care. You're the bad one." Bai Hua also joined in. If Di Chun and the others knew that they were tricked like this, they would definitely die from anger. Then they deserve it. The siege lion had a gloating expression on his face. Only Feng Xiuhuang remained silent. He raised his head to look at Ouyang Shuo and secretly shook his head. Fortunately, he had chosen the Mountain and Sea Alliance. Otherwise, he didn't know how he would have been tricked. Ouyang Shuo no longer paid attention to their ridicule. He turned to Zhang Liao and said, "General Zhang, for tomorrow's battle, bring the allied cavalry along. Tomorrow, we will break through the enemy's right flank. Without the protection of archers, it will be even more difficult. The cavalry must be prepared for a hard battle." "Don't worry, my lord." Zhang Liao was as calm as ever. Ouyang Shuo nodded and didn't say anything else. The next day, both sides got into formation and started the battle again. Just as Zhu Sheng had predicted, the Qiyu tribe's left flank was already in place. Ouyang Shuo still chose to command the right flank. As for the left flank, he was very assured with Zhang Liao there. Di Chen was standing not far away. He glanced at Ouyang Shuo's side and said doubtfully, "Strange, why don't I see the Mountain and Sea Alliance's cavalry today?" Military Kill Ripper curled his lips and said, "Don't be fooled by their performance yesterday. They must have suffered a lot of casualties. In my opinion, don't say Wu Yi is distressed and doesn't dare to send the cavalry into battle again." Peerless Magnificence shook his head and said, "Don't say Wu Yi is such a short-sighted person. Maybe they have some kind of conspiracy. We have to be careful." That's right. After a few mistakes, Di Chen had started to take Ouyang Shuo seriously. He was no longer as arrogant as before. "Look," Lao Ai pointed at Changxian's troops and said in surprise, "They seem to have purposely positioned themselves on our side. Are they here to spy on us?" Di Chen was shocked and said angrily, "Damn it, this must be Don't Say Wui's conspiracy. This guy must have snitched on us to the Yellow Emperor during the military conference yesterday." Peerless Magnificence shook his head helplessly and said, "Now, we have no choice but to face the mutant army. We have no choice but to lower our heads under the eaves. Next time, we must not choose the same side as this guy." Di Chun said hatefully. "Yes." Peerless Magnificence nodded in agreement. Lao Ai was shocked. Since when did Di Chun publicly declare that Don't Say Wui was soft? This was not a good sign. Was his choice right? Ouyang Shuo did not care about what Di Chun was thinking. He was currently observing the formation of the opposing army. In yesterday's battle, the Qiyu tribe had lost more than 10,000 men. In contrast, the Yanhuang Tribal Alliance had lost more than 12,000 men, even though they had the initiative on the battlefield. If not for Ouyang Shuo's contribution to the right flank, the Yellow Emperor tribe's casualties would have been even more severe. In the end, the stone and bronze weapons were at a disadvantage in the clash. This time, neither the Yellow Emperor nor Qiyu shouted. They directly ordered their troops to attack. After a night's rest, the soldiers once again rushed towards the enemy. They either killed the enemy or were killed by the enemy. It was extremely tragic. Not long after the battle began, Lord Chunshin and the war wolves joined forces and gathered their respective cavalry. They wanted to imitate Ouyang Shuo's action yesterday and attack the right flank of the Yellow Emperor tribe's camp. Unfortunately, they were doomed to fail. Ouyang Shu ordered Shi Wansui to place the blade and shield troops at the forefront. The armored heavy infantry took the lead. At the same time, The archers led by Mu King launched a continuous rain of arrows. Wave after wave, they obstructed the cavalry's advance. Before the enemy's cavalry could even get close, they had already suffered heavy casualties. The charging light cavalry couldn't advance even half a step in front of the elite infantry led by Shi Wansui, who was supported by this special class general. At this time, Changxin's troops had also rushed over to help. As for Di Chun and the others, they did not dare to take advantage of the situation. They had no choice but to fight against the opposing mutant army. On the opposite side of the battlefield, Lord Changxin saw that the cavalry's attack had been thwarted. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. He said to Xiongba and the war wolves beside him, "As expected, we still underestimated Don't Say Wooey. Not only are their cavalry powerful, but their infantry is also not the least bit inferior. They are really a difficult opponent." "What do we do now?" Wandering Huan asked from his side. "War Wolf, what do you think?" Lord Changxin did not make a decision on his own. Instead, he asked for the war wolf's opinion. As a military representative, the war wolf's understanding of war was clearly a notch higher than others. He said, "Since we can't break through the enemy's right flank, we might as well cut off our wrists. Give up on other ideas. In one spurt of energy, we will cripple the opposing mutant army. I just observed that there's no trace of Don't Say Wooey's cavalry, and the infantry has to defend against our cavalry. Thus, only Di Chen's troops and a few scattered people are left. On this side, we have the absolute advantage in military strength." Lord Changxin's eyes lit up. He said, "Good. We will do as the war wolf says." Chapter 139. As the battle entered a stalemate, Lord Changxin and war wolves decisively changed their formation. Chiyu Camp's 7,000 sword and shield troops and archers pressed forward and launched a fierce attack on the outermost Di Chen division. With such a huge disparity in military strength, Di Chen's side was no match for them, even with the help of battle tactics. Ouyang Shua did not leave them in the lurch. He immediately ordered his allies to reinforce them, and at the same time informed Changxin's troops to request for reinforcements. Ouyang Shua understood the principle of interdependence. Unfortunately, Lord Changxin and the rest changed their formation too quickly. Once they realized that the cavalry was not effective, they immediately turned to attack Di Chen's troops. By the time Ouyang Shua's allies and Changxin's troops arrived, Di Chen's troops had already been completely defeated and officially announced their withdrawal from this battle. Lord Changxin was also cunning. Once he realized that Ouyang Shua and Changxian had arrived, he did not advance rashly. Instead, he pulled back his defensive line and switched from offense to defense. For a moment, the battle on the right flank once again entered stalemate. With an ashen face, Di Chun retreated from the front lines with his 800 remaining troops. Ouyang Shua didn't pretend to comfort Di Chun. Otherwise, he didn't know what kind of outrageous things Di Chun would do. Di Chun was also depressed. He did not know who to blame. Blame Ouyang Shua. Not only had he blocked the enemy cavalry, but he had also arrived in time to reinforce them. Otherwise, they would not even have been able to protect their 200 men. If they were to blame Lord Changxin on the other side, there was even less to say. Since they were in the opposing camp, they should fight however they wanted. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame his own bad luck. Ouyang Shua, this freak, had stolen the position of the mutant's representative, causing his side to be suppressed. While the battle on the right flank was once again in a stalemate, the situation on the left flank was completely different. Just as Zhu Sheng had predicted, the Qiyu tribe's 70,000-strong army still maintained 40,000 men in the middle to resist the 50,000-strong army of the Yellow Emperor tribe. The left and right flank each had 15,000 men. 3,000 to 4,000 men had been transferred from the right flank to support the left flank. Thus, the 15,000 men on the right flank had to face the 30,000-strong army of the Yin Emperor tribe. Fortunately, the Qiyu army had a psychological advantage over the Yin Emperor tribe. Previously, The Yin Emperor tribe had been beaten back by the Qiyu tribe and had no choice but to ask for help from the Yellow Emperor tribe. Unfortunately, this balance was bound to be broken. Just when the two armies were entangled with each other, Zhang Liao led his 800 cavalrymen and stealthily made a big turn, and like a sharp knife, stabbed into the rear of the Qiyu tribe from the side. The Qiyu tribe on the right flank never thought that they would encounter the enemy cavalry at this time. They didn't even have a decent shield, so how could they resist the attack of the cavalry? This was especially true for the troops at the rear, which were mainly made up of archers. Their defensive line was as fragile as paper and was instantly pierced by the cavalry. This was especially so for the heavy-armored cavalrymen who acted as the arrowheads. Be it the long spears or arrows, when they hit the radiant armor, it was no different from scratching an itch. It was simply killing anyone who stood in their way. Under Zhang Liao's nimble command, the cavalry moved from east to west. The Qiyu tribe could only watch helplessly as the enemy galloped into their territory, unable to stop them. When the Yin Emperor saw that the cavalry had successfully broken through the enemy's defensive line, he immediately sent the reserve troops forward to exert pressure on the Qiyu tribe from the front. He wanted to divert their attention and not give them a chance to attack the cavalry. In this way, the Yin Emperor's troops pressed forward step by step, while the cavalry constantly weaved in and out of the Qiyu tribe. With the cooperation of the two armies, the Qiyu tribe was immediately brought into a dangerous situation and was about to be gradually devoured. When Qiyu received the request for help from the right flank, he was immediately shocked. He knew that his arrangements had long been seen through by the enemy, and they had even made a targeted arrangement. Helpless, Qiyu had to send reinforcements from the center of the army. If the right flank was also crippled, this battle would be even more difficult for him. It could only be said that Qiyu had underestimated Zhu Sheng's stratagem. When the Yellow Emperor, who was in command of the army, received the news that the left flank's attack was effective, he had been keeping an eye on the enemy's center. When he noticed the enemy's unusual movements, he immediately ordered the army to press forward, not giving Qiyu any chance to breathe. Although the Yellow Emperor's soldiers did not have an advantage in weapons, they could control ferocious beasts and had generals like Li Mu. In a head-on battle, they were not at a disadvantage at all. Originally, they had an advantage of tens of thousands of soldiers. Now that their advantage had increased once again, the Qiyu tribe's center began to feel the pressure. But this was not the end. The right flank, which had been passively defending, suddenly exerted force and began to attack. The right flank's army was more than twice the size of the enemy's army, but because it was a coalition of small and medium-sized tribes, its fighting strength was somewhat lacking. Now that the situation on the battlefield had reversed and victory was in sight, the tribal leaders were roused. They no longer gave orders, and many of them personally led the warriors of their tribes into battle, roaring as they charged towards the Qiyu tribe. For a moment, the left flank of the Qiyu tribe was immediately under great pressure. Facing a setback on three fronts, Qiyu's army was in danger of completely collapsing. The one to break the stalemate was the cavalry on the left flank. When Zhang Liao discovered that the enemy's center was rushing over to help, he immediately ordered the cavalry to charge straight into the reinforcement army. The Qiyu tribe's commander, who had rushed over to help, obviously did not expect the enemy to be so ferocious, advancing instead of retreating and directly attacking him. He immediately panicked. Zhang Liao was naturally very clear-headed. He knew that the enemy's right flank had been scattered by him like a headless fly. If the reinforcement army could smoothly converge with the right flank, it would be possible to regroup the army and stabilize the morale of the army. In this way, if the enemy was prepared, it would be difficult for his less than 1,000 troops to tear apart the enemy's defense line again. Therefore, the key to victory was to tear apart the reinforcement army and bring them into the maelstrom. In this way, no matter how many troops there were, as long as they could not regroup, it would give the cavalry an opportunity to advance and retreat calmly, splitting them up. What awaited them was only to be nibbled away by the Yin Emperor's army. Sure enough, the reinforcement army was also torn apart by the demonic cavalry. The Chiyu tribe on the right flank finally began to collapse, and some of the warriors began to flee towards the rear. Under the chain reaction, the right flank was completely routed. Yin Emperor naturally would not miss such a good opportunity. He led his troops in pursuit and relentlessly pursued the enemy. The collapse of the right flank finally led to the collapse of the entire army. Even with Chiyo's prestige, he could not stop his troops from fleeing. He could only helplessly order the army to retreat and preserve as many as he could. The retreating Chiyu glanced at the opposite side and let out a long sigh. He knew that his dream of dominating the Central Plains had been completely shattered in today's battle. The Yellow Emperor naturally would not allow Chiyu to retreat just like that. The Chiyu tribe's fresh troops were still intact. If they were not completely annihilated, Chiyu could make a comeback at any time. This was not something he wanted to see. The Yellow Emperor ordered the entire army to pursue the Chiyu tribe. At this moment, it was a feast of slaughter for the mutants of the Yellow Emperor's camp. Even Di Chun, who had retreated to the rear, returned with the remnants of his troops. Facing the fleeing Chiyu tribe was simply the best opportunity to harvest contribution points. Only Ouyang Shuo remained vigilant. He ordered his troops to pursue the Chiyu tribe while moving closer to the Yellow Emperor's chariot, closely following the Yellow Emperor. Seeing Ouyang Shuo, the Yellow Emperor's face lit up with joy. He said, "How can a mutant be without clothes? Today's victory is due to you. When we return, you'll be handsomely rewarded." Ouyang Shuo sat on his warhorse and said respectfully, "I dare not accept your praise. The victory of this battle is all due to your Majesty's benevolence and the bravery of the entire army. I dare not be greedy for credit." Ouyang Shuo only wanted a substantial reward. He naturally would not accept such an empty title. Moreover, it would easily offend the important ministers of the Yellow Emperor's tribe and the leader of a small tribe. Why bother? The Yellow Emperor nodded. He was very satisfied with Ouyang Shuo's tactfulness. But in his heart, he had already made up his mind to reward Ouyang Shuo well. The Yellow Emperor knew that today's victory was all due to Ouyang Shuo's 2 previous suggestions. If he did not reward him, he would not be able to convince the masses. Even if he did not say it, those ministers would still desperately suggest that he reward Ouyang Shuo to offset Ouyang Shuo's contributions. Facing the advancing allied army of the Yellow Emperor's tribe, the retreating Chiyu hardened his heart. He ordered a portion of the army to bring up the rear while he led the main force to retreat. The troops that brought up the rear were basically abandoned. They were completely abandoned. At this moment, Chiyu's prestige in the Jiuli tribe could be seen. Once they woke up from the reality of defeat, the soldiers who had fled at the beginning all felt ashamed. They volunteered to bring up the rear, swearing to protect their leader's safety. Chiyu reluctantly bade farewell to the soldiers at the rear and sped up the retreat. After retreating a certain distance, Chiyu decisively ordered a fire. He wanted to use the fire to completely block the pursuing Yellow Emperor army. The fire spread rapidly through the wind, covering the lush forests and grass of the Zhuolu wilderness in smoke and fire. But the damp weeds, trees, and swamps could not make the fire into a raging inferno. Instead, it formed thick smoke. The smoke drifted in the humid environment, forming fog. In the choking smoke, the pursuing soldiers of the Yellow Emperor's camp were completely lost. Helpless, the Yellow Emperor could only order the army to stop chasing and wait for further orders. The Yellow Emperor looked around at the ministers and said in a low voice, "Who can break through this fog?" The Yellow Emperor could not be blamed for being so anxious. If he could not catch up to Chiyu's army in time, it would be no different from releasing a tiger back into the mountains. Thinking that it would not be long before Chiyu made a comeback. How could the Yellow Emperor, who loved his people like they were his own children, bear to see that happen? In his view, recuperating and vigorously developing agriculture was the right way, the way of the king. An attack between tribes like this would ultimately be disadvantageous. The ministers looked at each other. With such a thick fog, they were truly helpless. To be continued. Chapter 140. P.S. The next chapter will be released at 1400 hours. Just as the ministers were helpless against the thick fog, Ouyang Shuo stood up. "Your Majesty, I have an item that can break through this fog." The Yellow Emperor was delighted. "What is it? Quickly bring it over." Ouyang Shuo nodded and took out the compass chariot from his storage bag. He placed it in front of the Yellow Emperor's chariot and explained, "This item is called the compass chariot. No matter where the chariot turns, the wooden figurine's hand will always point south. When setting off, set the direction of the wooden figurine and you will be able to pass through the fog." "Is it really that magical?" The Yellow Emperor was somewhat hesitant. Ouyang Shuo smiled confidently. "Your Majesty, you'll know once you try it." The Yellow Emperor gestured to Wind Empress, who understood and stepped forward to try the compass chariot. Needless to say, it was true. The compass chariot that Ouyang Shuo had prepared from the moment he entered the game was finally put to use. It was truly a long move. The Yellow Emperor was also a courageous person. Once he confirmed that the compass chariot was useful, he no longer hesitated and reorganized his troops. Under the guidance of the compass chariot, the troops lined up and plunged into the fog. Along the way, Bai Hua and the others stared at Ouyang Shuo as if he was a monster. In the end, Bai Hua couldn't help but ask, "Wui, how did you know that the compass chariot would be used in this battle?" Ouyang Shuo shook his head in amusement. He knew they would ask. "Actually, I wasn't sure either. Ever since I found out that the first battle was after the Battle of Zhuolu, I specially looked up historical information in this area. As you all know, this battle has actually been mythologized. As for the truth of history, we can only make a relatively reasonable inference from some clues. Among the descriptions of this battle, I was most interested in the compass chariot invented by the Yellow Emperor. It's obvious that the Yellow Emperor couldn't have created a compass chariot in that era. It was likely that the people of the later generations who invented the compass chariot added this honor to the Yellow Emperor. There are many similar cases. At that time, I thought that since this was recorded in history, perhaps the Yellow Emperor's troops were indeed trapped in the fog. However, they probably used other methods to break through the fog, such as using wild beasts to lead the way. I thought that if we could create a compass chariot and bring it to the battle map, it might have a miraculous effect. As expected, the fog still appeared. However, it was caused by a mountain fire, and not by Qiyu opening his mouth to spit out thick fog like in the legends. It's just that simple. It's just a fluke. Of course, Ouyang Shuo's words were nonsense. He was merely relying on the advantage of his rebirth to prepare himself in advance. However, it was impossible for him to tell everyone this, so he could only weave a white lie. After listening to Ouyang Shuo's explanation, everyone admired Ouyang Shuo even more. "Big Brother Wui is so awesome. I'm starting to worship you." If Ouyang Shuo really believed her nonsense, then he would really be in trouble. Baiwa also exclaimed in admiration. He gave a thumbs up to Ouyang Shuo and said, "Wui, you're amazing. To be able to grasp an opportunity from just a few clues in history, I think your acuity is not inferior to that mission maniac of the dragon-seeking acupoints." Ouyang Shuo didn't want to be entangled in this aspect, so he said, "All right, everyone, don't flatter me anymore. Just concentrate on the journey. The way I see it, there's a huge battle waiting for us after we pass through the fog." Yes, just as Ouyang Shuo had said, when the Yin Huang allied army passed through the dense fog under the guidance of the compass chariot, they saw Qi Yu's troops resting not far ahead. Even if you beat him to death, Qi Yu wouldn't believe that the Yellow Emperor's troops could pass through the fog so easily. Thus, they could rest and reorganize at ease. Qi Yu was still thinking of waiting for the troops to rest and reorganize before turning back and catching the Yellow Emperor off guard. Who would have thought that the other party would miraculously pass through the fog? This was a huge blow to Qi Yu, and his morale was greatly reduced. On the contrary, after passing through the fog, the Yin Huang allied army was even more convinced of the Yellow Emperor. They didn't know that the compass chariot was given by Ouyang Shuo, and they thought that the Yellow Emperor had displayed his might. With this, it was clear who was superior. The Yellow Emperor made up his mind to not give Qi Yu any chance. He directly ordered his troops to attack the Qi Yu tribe. The battle started again. This time, it was a battle that caused the sky to darken, the sun and moon to lose their light, and blood to flow like rivers. The Chiyu tribe resisted as they retreated, hoping to escape the fate of being chased again. The Yin Huang allied army chased closely behind, determined to wipe out the other party before stopping. The chase lasted for an entire day. Only when night fell did the two sides stop fighting. At this point, the Chiyu tribe had less than 50,000 people left. On the other hand, the Yin Huang allied army still had more than 100,000 people. The difference in military strength between the two sides had increased. As for the mutant army, they had also suffered heavy losses. Some of the Lord's players felt sorry for their troops and had already led their troops to escape from the side. In any case, the Yellow Emperor's target was Chiyu. As for the mutant army that had escaped, he only gave a symbolic chase and stopped there. Affected by this, more and more mutant army troops took advantage of the night to sneak away. In the end, only the troops of the Spring and Autumn Alliance and the Iron Blood Alliance were left. The two groups added up didn't even have 4,000 people. The reason why they stayed was to continue earning contribution points and maintain their position in the top 10 of the contribution rankings. They also had other intentions. As the saying goes, danger is opportunity. Perhaps at the last moment, Chiyu would give them a special mission. Thus, whether it was Lord Chunshin or Battle Wolf, neither was willing to leave just like that. No one dared to march in the Zhuelu Plains at night. Not to mention the problem of not being able to see, just the various ferocious beasts that came out at night to hunt were enough to terrify people. Thus, in the wilderness of the wilderness, people had to form a circle at night, light a bonfire, and arrange for people to keep watch at night. Only then could they feel at ease. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. Even so, the Yellow Emperor did not relax his surveillance of the Chiyu tribe. If the other side made a move, he would immediately attack no matter what. Fortunately, Chiyu was not hot-headed. Both sides passed a difficult night. Due to the current situation, Ouyang Shuo and the other players did not log off. They rested in their tents for the night. Otherwise, if they did not come online at the right time, it would truly be a tragedy. In the early hours of the next day, before the sky had even brightened, the Chiyu tribe began to break camp. When the Yellow Emperor received the news, he immediately ordered his troops to break camp. Both sides were aware of the current situation. It was a race against time, and there was no room for error. Last night, all the soldiers slept in their clothes. Their luggage was all packed and placed beside them, ensuring that they could set off at any time. When the sun rose from the horizon, in the vast Zhuelu Plains, a battle of life and death that concerned the survival of the tribe had already begun. The orange-red sunlight could not bring any warmth to the Chiyu tribe warriors. They were like onions that were being whittled away layer by layer by the pursuing Yin and Huang allied forces. What flowed in the hearts of the Chiyu tribe warriors was ice-cold despair. At this time, even Lord Chunshin could not bear the casualties of his troops. After a discussion with Xiongba, he decisively led his 3,000 allied troops to leave the battlefield from the side, withdrawing from this battle. Now, the only mutant army that remained by Chiyu's side was the Iron Blood Alliance's army of less than 1,000. Warwolves were soldiers and would not allow themselves to be deserters. Unfortunately, not everyone had the same sense of honor as Zhang Lang. Moreover, the other members of the Iron Blood Alliance were not from the military. At first, they respected the choice of Warwolves, the alliance leader. But in the afternoon, when the battle situation became more and more unfavorable, these allies finally could not hold on any longer and abandoned Warwolves. In the end, only the 300 soldiers of Blood Red Town remained. This battle of pursuit, destined to be recorded in the annals of history, lasted for 4 whole days. Both sides were almost out of ammunition and food. The Chiyu tribe headed south. Even when they passed by Chiyu village, they did not dare to stop. They resolutely fled towards the southern headquarters of the Jili tribe. On this day, the Chiyu tribe fled to the fierce Don Valley. Further south was the Hutuo River. The Hutuo River originated from the territory of the Yin Emperor tribe and converged with another tributary, the Fuyang River, to the east before flowing into the Bohai Sea. The headquarters of the Juli tribe was still south of the Fuyang River. Chiyu knew that the Yellow Emperor would not give him the opportunity to cross the Hutuo River. If they continued to flee like this, they were destined to be wiped out. As the leader of the Juli tribe, he had the responsibility to leave behind a spark for the tribe. That night, Chiyu gathered the surviving dozen or so brothers and said in a deep voice, "It seems that the Yellow Emperor is determined to kill me. I can't be so selfish and lead everyone to a dead end. For the sake of the tribe's reproduction, I've decided to fight the Yellow Emperor to the death in this fierce Dawn Valley. You're all my brothers, and I can't let the bloodline of the Juli tribe be severed. Therefore, I want to choose 4 people to lead a group of elites and leave the valley under the cover of night. We'll cross the Hutuo River and then the Fuyang River. We'll go all the way south and take our people to the deep mountains. Which one of you is willing to take on this heavy responsibility?" "Big brother, I'm not going. I want to fight alongside you." "I'm not going either. I'm not going. Even if I die, I want to die with you." None of Chiyu's brothers were cowards. None of them were willing to retreat first. Chiyu was touched and helpless at the same time. In the end, he chose 4 of his more quick-witted brothers and forcefully ordered them to retreat. After deciding on the candidates, Chiyu specifically asked someone to find the war wolf and gave him an A-rank side mission to escort these elites out of the fierce Dawn Valley. The war wolf was both surprised and happy. His persistence had finally paid off. It must be known that the basic reward of an A-rank side mission was 500 achievement points and 3,200 battle contribution points. This trip was truly worth it. To be continued. Chapter 141. Author's note. Chapter 2 will be updated at 9 p.m. When the sun rose from the horizon once again, the Chiyu tribe didn't flee this time. Instead, they chose to defend the valley. Standing next to the Yellow Emperor's carriage, Ouyang Shual looked at the ominous Dawn Valley and sighed. In history, Chiyu was killed in the ominous Dawn Valley. It seemed that this arduous pursuit was finally coming to an end. Feng Qing, Chiyu didn't retreat this time. Instead, he chose to defend. Is there a trap? The Yellow Emperor still trusted his prime minister, Feng Ho. Feng Ho shook his head. "Your Majesty, the Hutuo River is further south. I think Chiyu must have guessed that he won't be able to cross the Hutuo River under our noses. That's why he wants to fight us to the death in the valley." As expected of the Wind Empress, she had guessed Chiyu's thoughts perfectly. The Yellow Emperor was delighted. Good. Chiyu is seeking his own death. No wonder the Yellow Emperor was so excited. There wasn't much food left in the army. If this continued, his army would collapse before the Chiyu tribe surrendered. Fortunately, the Hutuo River cut off Chiyu's last chance of survival. Order the army to cook. Once we're full, launch an all-out attack. Take down the ominous Dawn Valley and kill Chiyu, the Yellow Emperor said excitedly. Understood. There was no suspense in this battle. The difference in numbers between the two sides was too great. The Yellow Flame tribe's allied army still had 80,000 people left. Apart from that, there were 4,000 mutants. The Chiyu tribe had less than 8,000 people. As for the mutants, there wasn't a single one. Ouyang Shuo didn't know if dragon-seeking acupuncture had made the right choice. Before the battle, dragon-seeking acupuncture had used the advantage of the ration pills to fully display his mission maniac nature. He swept through all the side missions of the Chiyu tribe and earned 7,500 contribution points. After the battle, dragon-seeking acupuncture's 200 people couldn't cause any trouble and left the battlefield early. At 9 a.m., the Allied army officially launched their attack on the ominous Dawn Valley. The ominous Dawn Valley was like a big pocket. It was narrow on the outside and wide on the inside. The narrow entrance of the valley couldn't spread out troops on a large scale. As such, even though the Yin Huang Allied army had a large number of troops, they were limited by the terrain and had no choice but to attack wave after wave. In order to buy enough time for the siege troops to retreat in advance, Chiyu arranged all 8,000 people at the entrance of the valley, leaving no way out for himself. At the same time, in order to boost morale, Chiyu personally went into battle. Just like that, what was supposed to be a decisive battle in the wilderness had turned into a stormy battle. The Yin-Huang allied forces had the absolute advantage in numbers, and they attacked in batches. Feng Ho divided the coalition army into 8 teams of 10,000 men. Apart from leaving one team as a reserve, the remaining 7 teams took turns to attack. After the previous team of 10,000 was exhausted, they would immediately replace it with another team of 10,000. The 10,000 troops that had been withdrawn would take their place after sufficient rest and reorganization, and the cycle would repeat. On the other hand, the Qiyu tribe was not so lucky. They had to endure a long battle. However, the Qiyu tribe was not without advantages. Firstly, the soldiers were determined to die, and their will to resist was extremely firm. Secondly, in a situation where both sides had the same number of troops, be it in terms of morale or the level of weapons, the defending side was stronger than the attacking side. As a result, the Qiyu tribe managed to hold on tenaciously. The Yellow Emperor grew anxious at the lack of success. At this rate, even if they could destroy the Qiyu tribe in the end, their side would suffer heavy casualties. This was something the Yellow Emperor did not want to see. The Yellow Emperor looked around and said in a low voice, "Does anyone have a good plan for the current situation?" Ouyang Shua's heart stirred. He bowed to the Yellow Emperor and said, "Your Majesty, the mutant army requests for battle." The Yellow Emperor's eyes narrowed. "How can there be no clothes? Are you confident?" "As long as your Majesty agrees to 2 conditions, I promise to take down the remnants of the Qiyu tribe in one fell swoop. If I fail, I am willing to accept military punishment." Ouyang Shua was also unequivocal. The Yellow Emperor was shaken, finally somewhat convinced. He loudly said, "Very well. What are your conditions? As long as I can do it, I will definitely satisfy you." Ouyang Shua nodded. "Your Majesty, you also know that the mutant armies are not unified and difficult to command. Thus, my first condition is for your Majesty to issue a military mission and have all the mutants submit their troops to my command." "Very well, I agree." The Yellow Emperor did not hesitate. As soon as he finished speaking, a system notification sounded in Ouyang Shua's ears. Campaign announcement. The Yellow Emperor has issued a campaign mission, Decisive Battle. Mission requirements. All players in the Yellow Emperor's camp agree to submit their troops to the mutant representative. How can there be no clothes? Mission rewards: 2 N achievement points for N contribution points, of which N is the number of troops submitted. Taking the lowest 100 people as an example, just the mission reward alone would be 200 merit points and 800 contribution points. Apart from that, the contribution points obtained from killing these troops would also be recorded under the names of their lords. No player would be able to resist this kind of naked temptation. Even Di Chun was reluctant to give up on the mission rewards. He gritted his teeth and accepted the mission, obediently handing over command of his troops. Ouyang Shua continued, "Your Majesty, just relying on 4,000 mutant soldiers is indeed a bit weak. Thus, my second condition is that your Majesty can arrange for Generals Li Mu and Chang Xian to lead 5,000 elites and cooperate with the mutant army to launch an attack." After hearing Ouyang Shua's conditions, the Yellow Emperor was even more confident in Ouyang Shua's plan. He nodded and said, "Very well. It seems that you really aren't being impulsive." "I agree. Thank you for your trust, your Majesty." Ouyang Shua knew that as long as he won this battle, he would have the absolute advantage. The Battle of Zhuolu was already in his bag. Ouyang Shua turned around and returned to the mutant army. He gathered Bai Hua and the others and began assigning tasks. It will be difficult for the cavalry to perform well in this battle. Thus, the main force will be the saber and shield soldiers and archers. I suggest that General Shi Wansui be the main general and General Mu Ging be the deputy general. What do you all think? Bai Hua and the others trusted Ouyang Shua more and more, so they naturally listened to him. After obtaining the consent of his allies, Ouyang Shua began to organize the mutant army. In his plan, he had to ensure that Shi Wansui and Mu Ging had absolute command. Thus, not only would Ouyang Shua not participate, but the other players and generals would also not be considered. Fortunately, the remaining mutants were mostly allies of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. Di Qin's Handan Alliance only had 500 people left, which was the most severe loss. As for the unaffiliated players, there were only 200 people left. The remaining 3,300 people were all allies of the Alliance of Mountains and Seas. Of the 3,300 people, the Alliance of Mountains and Seas had 2,000 core soldiers, and only 1,600 were left. With more than half of the mutant army dead, it was already very rare for the Alliance of Mountains and Seas to maintain a casualty rate of 20%. Among the 400 people who died, most of them were saber and shield soldiers and cavalry. As for the archers, they were almost unharmed. In the end, out of the 4,000 mutant army, there were 2,000 saber and shield soldiers, 1,500 archers, and 500 cavalry. The cavalry had experienced 2 assaults and suffered heavy losses. In this battle, Ouyang Shua directly excluded them. After the mutant army was organized, Li Mu and Chang Xian had also chosen their troops, each leading 2,500 people. Under Zhu Shou's suggestion, the 2,000 saber and shield soldiers were placed at the forefront of the army. They would act as a stabilizing force and fight against Qi Yu head-on. 1,500 archers acted as the rear army, arranged behind the blade and shield soldiers to provide fire support. Li Mu's troops were positioned on the right flank. Chang Xian's troops were positioned on the left flank. After the arrangements were made, the 10,000 soldiers retreated as per usual. Ouyang Shua did not intend to give the Qi Yu tribe any time to rest, so he directly sent his trump card to the front. Before setting off, Ouyang Shua found Shi Wansui alone and had a private talk with him for a few minutes. Even Bai Hua and the others did not know the content of the conversation. The final battle had finally arrived. The exhausted Qi Yu tribe trembled when they saw the saber and shield soldiers at the front. The well-equipped saber and shield soldiers made up for the gap in strength and morale. This was especially true for the few companies at the front. This time, Ouyang Shua did not hesitate to send the 3 infantry companies from the Shanghai town to the front of the army. The elite mountain barbarian warriors did not seem to be at a disadvantage when facing the Zhuli tribe's warriors. As for Qi Yu himself, he was taken on by Shi Wansui. It could be called a trump card against a trump card. Seeing Ouyang Shua's arrangement, the other players did not dare to say anything out of line. Ouyang Shua knew that if he wanted to win the respect of the players, he had to stand up at the critical moment and learn to be at a disadvantage. The archers at the back were the first to attack. Under the precise command of Mu Ging, the 1,500 archers showed the Qi Yu tribe the great power of the powerful crossbows from the future generations. They had a super long shooting range and a super strong penetrating power. The defenseless Qi Yu tribe was harvested row by row like wheat. The front was blocked by the saber and shield soldiers led by Shi Wansui. They could not advance even an inch. The left and right flanks were blocked by the elite troops led by Li Mu and Chang Xian. The helpless Qi Yu could only watch helplessly as his men fell under the crossbows of the mutants. Before the Zhuli tribe's warriors fell, they looked at the arrows stuck in their chests, their eyes full of confusion. Even Emperor Yin and Emperor Huang, who were standing in the distance, could not help but tremble when they saw the power of the mutant army. Emperor Huang sighed in his heart. He had underestimated these mutants. Fortunately, they did not belong to this world. Otherwise, it would be hard to say who would be the leader. To be continued. Chapter 142. In the ferocious Dawn Valley, the god of war, Qi Yu, welcomed the final battle of his life. The powerful god of war let out an unwilling roar towards the sky of the desolate land. Holding a bronze axe inlaid with white bones, he fought with Shi Wansui, neither of them willing to let the other go. Qi Yu forgot about his hegemony, the Zhuli tribe that he fought for, and the men standing behind him. Right now, he was only a warrior, and his only desire was to fight. Qi Yu's ferocity completely aroused Shi Wansui's fighting spirit. Ever since he was summoned by Ouyang Shua, Shi Sui had never fought with his full strength because there was no worthy opponent. And Qi Yu was undoubtedly the best opponent. Qi Yu was undoubtedly powerful. Not only was he born with divine strength, but he was also skilled in martial arts. His moves were straight to the point. There was nothing fancy about them. They were all the results of countless battles that he had been through. Therefore, Qi Yu's attacks were incomparably swift and fierce. They were large and powerful. In terms of strength, Shi Sui naturally couldn't compare to Qi Yu. However, his spear techniques were exquisite. Moreover, the Damascus steel spear made of fine iron was many levels higher than Qi Yu's bronze axe. Coupled with the tiger fish scale armor that he wore, Shi Sui had an absolute advantage in terms of weapons and equipment. Of the two people fighting, one dominated with strength, using strength to break through technique. The other used skill to show off his might, using skill to break through clumsiness. This battle that transcended time and space attracted everyone's attention. The soldiers on both sides tacitly stopped fighting at the same time, leaving enough space for the two to fight. Although Qi Yu had fought for a long time, his physique was different from ordinary people. He had abundant physical strength that was endless and inexhaustible. Even though Shi Sui was conserving his energy, the two were still evenly matched. As the battle progressed, Shi Sui became more and more excited. He displayed the blazing sun spear technique to its fullest, displaying the demeanor of a spear master with every move. This was the first time Ouyang Shuo saw Shi Sui display the blazing sun spear technique to such a level, and he was dazzled. Zhang Liao was also enlightened. He finally realized the difference between him and an emperor-level general. In the face of Shi Sui's attacks, war god Qi Yu was not afraid at all. He waved the bronze axe in his hand and dissolved Shi Sui's attacks into nothingness. From time to time, he would even take the opportunity to counterattack. The Damascus steel spear and the bronze axe were about the same length, and their trunks were also made of wood. The only difference was that one had a fine iron spearhead, while the other had a bronze axe blade. As time went on, the superiority of the Damascus steel spear gradually became apparent. The spearhead struck the axe's edge, continuously creating nicks. However, a war god was a war god after all. Even though his weapon had suffered a setback, his might didn't diminish at all. His powerful slashes created a lot of pressure on Shi Sui, and he was in constant danger. More often than not, Shi Sui wanted to use his spear to parry the axes, but because of the difference in strength, his arm would go numb from the impact. The fierce battle between the two began to enter a white-hot stage. The dust stirred up by the battle made it difficult to see the figures of the two combatants. The warriors on both sides began to chant in unison, cheering for their commanders with great momentum. As time passed, Shi Sui slowly began to gain the upper hand. He made full use of his advantage in weapons, constantly attacking Qi Yu's bronze axe with skillful power, shattering the white bone inlaid on the axe. This kind of tactic consumed a lot of Qi Yu's physical strength. At this moment, Qi Yu, who was covered in blood, let out another angry roar. The muscles all over his body bulged, and at first glance, it seemed as if he had grown a size larger. A surging blood-colored, baleful aura spread out from Qi Yu's body like a surging sea. The surrounding soldiers couldn't withstand this evil, baleful aura at all. Some of the already injured soldiers directly died from the impact of the baleful aura, bleeding out of their 7 orifices. Such a shocking change couldn't help but be aghast. Not good. The Yellow Emperor, who was watching the battle from afar, cried out in alarm. This is Qi Yu activating the demon god's bloodline in his body. It will multiply Qi Yu's combat strength. I'm afraid General Shi is no match for him. Then what should we do? Ouyang Shuo was somewhat anxious. If Shi Sui was killed by Qi Yu, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for Shanhai Town. No amount of mission rewards would be enough to make up for such a loss. Don't panic. In the end, the Yellow Emperor was the calmest. The only thing we could do now is to win with numbers. Qi Yu activating the demon god's bloodline won't last long. As long as we can block this wave, Qi Yu will definitely die. The Yellow Emperor turned to look at Feng Ho. Feng Qing signaled the flag and orderly Mu and Changxian to go up. The three of them will attack Qiyu. We must take him down. Yes, sir. Feng Ho didn't dare to slack off and immediately took action. Li Mu and Changxian, who were on the left and right flanks, had long been excited by the battle between Qiyu and Shi Wansui. They couldn't wait to get on the field. As soon as they saw the flag, they immediately charged at Qiyu without a word. In just a short while, Shi Wansui was already surrounded by danger. Fortunately, he had been on the battlefield for many years, and fighting bloody battles was a common occurrence. Qiyu's baleful aura didn't have too much of a negative impact on him. The difficult part was that Qiyu's already terrifying strength became even more terrifying after activating his bloodline. Shi Wansui didn't dare to fight Qiyu head-on. His arm went numb when he tried to resist. At this moment, Shi Wansui's rich battle experience played a crucial role. After recognizing the situation, he immediately dodged Qiyu's attacks. He didn't want to win, but only to avoid making mistakes. He began to fight Qiyu. Qiyu roared in anger. His cunning opponent made him feel aggrieved that he had all his strength, but nowhere to use it. The demon god's bloodline had already begun to erode his will, making him even crazier. Qiyu's moves were no longer as exquisite as before. He just hacked randomly. At this moment, Changxian and Li Mu arrived. Qiyu's brothers also wanted to help, but they were stopped by Zhao Sihu's soldiers. Zhao Sihu knew that protecting General Shi's safety was his top priority. Therefore, he would definitely not allow Qiyu's brothers to come forward and help them out. A chaotic battle began again. With reinforcements, Shi Wansui finally heaved a sigh of relief. The opponent in front of him couldn't be judged by common sense. This kind of bloodline activation only happened in the Desolate Age. Shi Wansui and the other two were like beasts besieging them. They stood in a circle and constantly changed their positions, trapping Qiyu in the middle, making him unable to move. Qiyu dashed left and right, but couldn't really hurt the three. He was so angry that he roared like a wild beast. Qiyu, the god of war, finally reached his end. Half an hour later, Qiyu's bloodline activation gradually faded, and the side effects began to show. At this moment, his strength wasn't even as strong as usual. His previously inexhaustible physical strength began to run out. His chaotic consciousness began to clear up. Qiyu saw the situation clearly, but he didn't choose to retreat. He roared, "Kill!" and rushed toward Shi Wansui. Shi Wansui didn't flinch. He also shouted, "Kill!" At this moment, Li Mu and Changxian had tacitly retreated, leaving the battlefield to the other two. The two fiercely fought again. The situation had been reversed. Qiyu, the god of war, was no longer able to suppress Shi Wansui's attacks. Under Shi Wansui's fierce attacks, Qiyu was at a disadvantage. Finally, Shi Wansui seized the opportunity and chopped off Qiyu's bronze axe. Qiyu, who had lost his weapon, was doomed. However, the god of war didn't flinch. Holding the broken wooden pole, he fiercely attacked Shi Wansui. Shi Wansui wouldn't give Qiyu any chance. He used a spear to knock the wooden pole away and stabbed it into Qiyu's chest. Then, Shi Wansui used his unique skill. His Damascus steel spear suddenly rotated rapidly, directly crushing Qiyu's heart. This impact drill was the pinnacle of strength and technique. It was very difficult to pull out the spearhead that had pierced into a human body, not to mention rotating it inside the body. The true essence of the Scorching Sun spear art was this impact drill. The rotating spearhead would heat up and burn the enemy to death. Worthy of the name of the Scorching Sun, Qiyu's eyes widened. He looked at Shi Wansui in disbelief, then lowered his head to look at his chest. There was already a huge hole there, and blood was gurgling out. Even the god of war couldn't survive with his heart crushed. The god of war fell to the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. The flowing blood dyed the ground red. The moment Qiyu died, Shi Wansui walked to Qiyu's corpse and took out a small ancient bottle from under the corpse. He quietly put it in his robes. Seeing Chiyu die, the warriors of the Juli tribe could no longer muster up any will to resist. They were all dumbfounded, their eyes filled with disbelief. At this moment, the mighty Yellow Emperor showed his magnanimity as a king. He walked to the front of the formation and said to the warriors of the Juli tribe, "Warriors of the Juli tribe, you have done your best. Surrender. I promise you that I will let bygones be bygones." If they could live, no one would beg for death. Since their leader, Chiyu, was dead, they had lost the goal they fought for. At this moment, surrendering was the logical choice. The only ones who didn't surrender were Chiyu's brothers. After taking in the remnants of the Juli tribe, the Yellow Emperor learned that Chiyu's remaining troops had escaped from the fierce Dawn Valley. He immediately ordered General Chang Xian to chase after them. Of course, this was just doing his best. After such a long time, Chiyu's remaining troops had already crossed the Hutuo River. Catching up to them was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. After killing Chiyu, the Yellow Emperor's prestige rose to a whole new level. He now had the appearance of an emperor. It was time to replace Shennong and become the ruler of the world. The excited Yellow Emperor ordered Chiyu's head to be chopped off. The entire army returned to the Yellow Emperor city to be rewarded according to their contributions. As the greatest hero of this battle, Ouyang Shuo was lucky enough to follow the Yellow Emperor's carriage. To be continued. Chapter 143. Before returning, Ouyang Shuo calculated the losses of the battle. Before the battle in the ferocious Dawn Valley, the Mountain and Sea Alliance still had 1,600 people left. In the battle in the ferocious Dawn Valley, another 200 saber and shield soldiers had died. In the end, only 1,400 soldiers survived. Mountain and Sea Town's army of 1,000 was now down to 700. Among them, 100 were cavalry, 50 were heavy infantry, 100 were saber and shield soldiers, 150 were archers, and 300 were crossbowmen. The cavalry and saber and shield soldiers suffered the heaviest losses, losing half of them. As for the crossbowmen, because they had been fighting in the rear, they suffered almost no losses. They only lost 50 archers. What made Ouyang Shuo's heart ache the most was the 100 horses that were lost along with the cavalry. Because the cavalry was in charge, as long as the cavalry fell behind, the war horses would not be able to follow them back. Basically, they would be killed by the enemy on the battlefield. Among the allies, Mulan Yue was the luckiest. The 100 archers she brought were almost unharmed. The worst was by Hua. Of the 300 cavalry he brought, 200 had died. After all, Lingxi Town's cavalry had all been transferred from the system. They rode ordinary horses, which were incomparable to the Mountain and Sea Town's horses. In addition, the siege lions and Feng Qiuhuang's saber and shield soldiers had also died. If Ouyang Shuo hadn't led the Mountain and Sea Town's saber and shield soldiers to the front, they would have lost even more. The Mountain and Sea Alliance was a powerful alliance, but they still had a death rate of 1/3. The other players, other than those who were sneaky, had a death rate of more than half. As for people like Dichun, their death rate was close to 80%. It could be said that they had been completely wiped out. From this, one could imagine how tragic the battle map was. Fortunately, there was always a reward. As soon as he returned to Yellow Emperor's city, Ouyang Shuo heard a battle announcement. Battle announcement. The Battle of Zhuolu has officially ended. Additional contribution points will be calculated according to the player's contribution to the battle and the overall index. Immediately after, Ouyang Shuo heard a special system notification. System notification. Player who says he has no clothes. The representative of the Yellow Emperor's factions Inhumans. With a cavalry ambush tactic, you broke the balance of power between the Yellow Emperor's faction and Chiyu's faction, successfully pushing the war in favor of the Yellow Emperor's faction. You contributed the Compass Chariot to further push the war forward. In the battle of the ferocious Dawn Valley, you stepped forward at the crucial moment and decided the outcome of the battle with one battle. You have made great contributions and will be rewarded with an additional 30,000 contribution points. After calculating all the players' additional contribution points, the final contribution ranking was officially established. Rank, name, contribution points, first place. Don't say you have no clothes, 0 points, second place. White Birch, 25,000 points, third place. Feng Xiaohuang, 10 points, fourth place. Wolf Warrior, 15,000 points, fifth place. Lord Chunshin, 12,000 points, sixth place. Dragon Point Seeking Point, 10,000 points, seventh place. Emperor Dust, 0 points, eighth place. Magnolia Moon, 7,500 points, ninth place. Siege Lion, 6,000 points, 10th place. Feng Qingyang, 5,500 points. Ouyang Shua had obtained 20,000 contribution points from killing Qi Yu and an additional 30,000 contribution points from killing the cavalry and archers on the battlefield, as well as the reward from the side mission and the battle mission that the Yellow Emperor had issued at the end of the stage. His total contribution points had reached an astonishing 80,000 contribution points, far ahead of the rest. White Birch was closely behind him. Zhang Liao and the 300 cavalry from Lingxi town that he had led had played a very important role in the 2 cavalry raids. Thus, in the final calculation of the additional rewards, White Birch had obtained 10,000 contribution points, second only to Ouyang Shua. Compared to White Birch, Feng Qiuhuang's contribution points were much lesser. This was also thanks to the 200 archers that she had brought with her, who had given her many kills on the battlefield. Otherwise, her total contribution points would have been even lower. The 4th to 6th places were occupied by Qi Yu's camp. Wolf Warrior had relied on his perseverance at the very last moment to suppress Lord Chunshin and obtain first place in Qi Yu's camp. As for Dragon Point Seeking Point, it was entirely due to his accumulation from the side mission. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to have such a high ranking. Di Chen's troops from Handan Town were almost completely annihilated, but he still managed to obtain a place in the rankings. The 8th and 9th places were occupied by the 2 lucky dogs, Mulan Yue and the Siege Lion. If it wasn't for Ouyang Shua's help in arranging his troops, it would have been difficult for the 2 of them to enter the top 10. Mulan Yue was able to suppress the Siege Lion, thanks to Mu Ging and the 100 archers that she had led. The last place was occupied by the silent Feng Qingyang. He had defeated Xiongba, Lao Ai, Military Kill Ripper, Wandering Linghuan, and other heavyweights to obtain the last place. Looking at the entire contribution point ranking, the most glorious one was undoubtedly Ouyang Shua and the Mountain and Sea Alliance that he led. Not only did they occupy half of the rankings, they even occupied the top 3 places. After the contribution point ranking was determined, the system started to distribute the contribution points. Ouyang Shua finally welcomed his blissful moment. The melodious sound of the system's notification once again rang in his ears. System notice. Congratulations to player who says that has nothing close has obtained a total of 0 contribution points. Based on the 10:1 ratio, the reward is 0 contribution points. System notice. Congratulations to player who says that has nothing close for obtaining first place in this contribution point ranking. You are rewarded with 4,000 contribution points. Ouyang Shua had obtained 12,000 contribution points in one go. In addition to the 1,400 contribution points from the side mission and the 1,600 contribution points from the Yellow Emperor's final battle mission, he had obtained a total of 15,000 contribution points in the Zhuolu battle. What was slightly regrettable was that the battle map didn't reward experience points, be it for players or NPC soldiers. Just from this battle alone, the contribution points he had obtained were equivalent to the total contribution points Ouyang Shua had obtained in the main map since the start of the server. It seemed a little exaggerated. However, when he thought about the difficulty of advancing his noble rank, it wasn't exaggerated at all. In addition to the contribution points he had obtained from this battle, Ouyang Shua's noble rank had barely advanced to the first grade Earl. He was still more than 20,000 contribution points away from the higher third-grade Marquis. He had a long way to go. After settling the issue of the contribution points, Bai Hua and the others were about to leave the battle map with their troops. Only Ouyang Shua stayed behind. He still had to go to the palace to receive the final reward. Before leaving, Bai Hua expressed her gratitude to Ouyang Shuo. In this battle, she'd become the second biggest winner besides Ouyang Shuo, and she'd obtained a total of 6,100 merit points. She'd instantly advanced her rank from first-rank Viscount to third-rank Count, and she was only a step away from becoming a second-rank Count. Apart from Bai Hua, the other people's noble ranks had also been promoted. Feng Xiuhuang had been promoted from third-grade Earl to second-grade Earl. Mulan Yue and Siege Lion had also been promoted from third-grade Viscount to first-grade Viscount. As for dragon-seeking acupuncture points, because they weren't in the same camp, Ouyang Shuo wasn't sure about his situation. However, based on his ranking and the contribution points he had obtained from the side quest, Ouyang Shuo estimated that dragon-seeking acupuncture points should have been promoted from second-grade Viscount to third-grade Earl. After all, the contribution points rewarded from side quests were still quite considerable. After bidding farewell to everyone, Ouyang Shuo walked into the palace alone. At this time, the Yellow Emperor was in the midst of evaluating the merits of the battle. All the soldiers had their own rewards. Seeing Ouyang Shuo, the Yellow Emperor stood up from his throne and said, "Welcome, our great hero." Ouyang Shuo hastily bowed and said respectfully, "It's just an insignificant skill. I don't deserve your majesty's praise." The Yellow Emperor waved his hand and said, "You don't need to be modest. I know that you mutants are about to return to your own world, so I won't waste your time." The Yellow Emperor took out 2 booklets from his bosom and personally handed them to Ouyang Shuo. He said, "This is an additional reward for you. Take it." Ouyang Shuo suppressed the excitement in his heart and received the 2 booklets. He said, "Thank you, your majesty, for the reward." The Yellow Emperor said, "You may leave." Ouyang Shuo didn't leave. He stood in the middle of the palace with a somewhat hesitant expression. The Yellow Emperor doubtfully asked, "What? Is there something else?" Ouyang Shuo clenched his teeth and said, "Your Majesty, I have another request." "What is it?" The Yellow Emperor furrowed his brows. Ouyang Shuo braced himself and said, "I would like to request your Majesty to bestow a personal keepsake of yours." If it wasn't for Ouyang Shuo's great contribution, the Yellow Emperor wouldn't have even thought about it and directly refused. The Yellow Emperor was clearly unhappy with this kind of behavior that didn't know when to advance or retreat. Fortunately, he was, after all, a mighty ruler of a generation and a ruler who would soon control the world. He still had the necessary magnanimity. The Yellow Emperor pondered for a moment. He didn't have many personal belongings, so the only thing he could take out was the wolf fang necklace on his neck. He recalled that the Flame Emperor mentioned that it was the person in front of him who saved the little girl. The Yellow Emperor no longer hesitated. He took off the necklace and handed it to Ouyang Shuo. He said, "This is an accessory that I've worn for a long time. I now bestow it to you. I hope you cherish it." Ouyang Shuo was startled. He didn't expect the Yellow Emperor to bestow such a precious thing. He gratefully said, "Thank you, your Majesty, for your generous gift. I will never forget it." The Yellow Emperor waved his hand and said with flagging interest, "All right, you've received the reward. You may leave." "Yes." This time, Ouyang Shuo didn't hesitate and directly left. Ouyang Shuo walked out of the palace. He didn't immediately look at the 2 booklets. Instead, he rushed outside the city and met up with his troops, preparing to leave the battle map. It wasn't as troublesome to leave as it was to come. The battle map didn't have a teleportation array. As long as the players silently said return, the system would automatically teleport the player and his troops back to the territory. Moreover, there was no teleportation fee. It was very user-friendly. Ouyang Shuo took one last look at the wild land and silently said in his heart, "Return." A white light flashed, and Ouyang Shuo and his troops instantly disappeared. When he opened his eyes again, he was already back at the teleportation array in Shanghai town. To be continued. Chapter 144. P.S. 11 p.m. Guarantee. Chapter 2. When Ouyang Shual walked out of the teleportation array, a series of system announcements rang in his ears. System announcement: the Battle of Zhualu has officially ended. The Yellow Emperor Tribe, Yin Emperor Tribe, and Zhuli Tribe have automatically joined the game. The three tribes are hidden tribes. Players are invited to explore on their own. So-called hidden tribes were akin to Shangri-La. They would not actively interact with the outside world, and players would find it very difficult to subdue the historical figures of the hidden tribes. If a player was lucky enough to find a hidden tribe, they would most likely receive some extra rewards. Overall, it didn't affect the wilderness much. This was also because they were historical figures from the Savage era. Bosses like the Yellow Emperor were historical figures that could not be tamed. They lived in the palace and never came out. The others, like the Wind Empress and Limu, tore apart the outer clothing of legends. In the eyes of the later generations, they were ordinary and didn't have much value in subduing them. The entire course of the campaign seemed to be full of ups and downs, but in fact, the main map was only the afternoon of the 16th day of the 5th lunar month in the first year of Gaia. Not even 2 days had passed, so it did feel like a lifetime had passed. After returning, Ouyang Shual ordered the troops to return to their respective camps. At the same time, he instructed the Military Affairs Office to properly appease the fallen soldiers and replenish their numbers. For the entire Zhualu battle, the teleportation fees, the purchase of logistical resources, and the conversion of the army's losses cost a rough estimate of 3,500 gold coins. Apart from the 15,000 achievement points, the only things left were 3 booklets, a small bottle, and a wolf-fang necklace. Ouyang Shual returned to the mansion and walked into his office. He took out the 3 booklets and looked through them one by one. The first book was Ancestor Lei's Silkworm Rearing Experience Handbook, gifted by Ancestor Luo. After using it, the silk production of the territory will be increased by 20%. Ouyang Shual was ready to hand it over to the Textile Association. The second booklet was given to Ouyang Shual by the Yellow Emperor. It had a leather cover and looked very simple. Savage Beast Taming Art, a taming art unique to the savage world. Increases savage beast taming rate by 20%. Ouyang Shual's heart skipped a beat. The Yellow Emperor's tribe's secret to taming wild beasts was in this book. The Yellow Emperor was really willing to pass on his tribe's secret techniques to him. Ouyang Shual didn't say anything else and immediately started learning. System notice: congratulations to player not wearing for learning savage taming technique. Rewarding 500 reputation points. The third booklet was also bestowed by the Yellow Emperor. It was a treasure that Ouyang Shual had dreamed of obtaining. Name: Inner Canon of the Yellow the Arch. Chi Cultivation Chapter. Emperor Level Technique. Level 112 Attribute. For every increase in level, Root Bone +2, Comprehension +1, all acquired attributes +1 characteristics. Unique item. Cannot be dropped, cannot be traded. Evaluation. One of the chapters in the Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. It mainly talks about the cultivation of Qi and the cultivation of Qi. It is the highest level of inner strength cultivation method. After mastering it, it would produce a golden inner force that had endless uses. Remark: this is a combination technique. The player is left to explore the rest on his own. Ouyang Shual suppressed the excitement in his heart and pressed his right hand on the front of the secret manual. The sound of a system notification rang out. System notice: congratulations to player, who says that has no clothes for obtaining the Emperor Tier Cultivation Method, Yellow Emperor's Canon of Internal Medicine. Qi Nurturing Chapter. Do you wish to learn it? Practice. With a swoosh, the secret manual in his hand turned into a golden light and shot into the space between Ouyang Shual's eyebrows. In an instant, all the cultivation information about the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Cultivation Chapter, surged into his mind, waiting for him to slowly digest it. After a whole hour, Ouyang Shual slowly opened his eyes. As expected of the most powerful inner strength manual in history, the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Cultivation Chapter was so broad and profound that Ouyang Shual unknowingly became obsessed with it. He had an urge to put aside the matters of the territory and focus on practicing inner strength. Although this was very unrealistic. After practicing the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Cultivation Chapter, Ouyang Shua finally put down a big stone in his heart. He had one less shackle that bound him, which made him more confident and calm. After dealing with the 3 booklets, Ouyang Shua took out the small ancient bottle that Shi Wansui had found under Chiyo's corpse. Before this, Ouyang Shua and Shi Wansui had secretly talked about this small bottle. In principle, the NPCs on the battle map would not drop any items, except for the faction leader. It was fine if it did not drop, but once it did, it would definitely be a high-quality item. Chiyo's Blood Essence activates the God of Combat talent after consumption. The attributes were very simple, but they were very shocking. Ouyang Shua had yet to activate his talent, so Chiyo's Blood Essence was perfect. In the battle map, Chiyo had activated his Fiend Celestial Bloodline during his battle with Shi Wansui. The only flaw was that after activating the Bloodline, one's consciousness would become chaotic and there would be side effects. Ouyang Shua smiled. Perhaps the heavens really wanted him to become extraordinary. The inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Cultivation Chapter perfectly resolved these flaws. The golden inner strength happened to be the nemesis of the Fiend Celestial Bloodline. As long as Ouyang Shua worked hard, there would come a day when he could perfectly resolve the side effects of the Fiend Celestial Bloodline. Perhaps even Gaia never expected that a player would obtain 2 heaven-defying items at the same time in the Zhuolu battle. Ouyang Shua did not hesitate as he opened the bottle cap and swallowed the drop of Chiyo's Blood Essence. Immediately, a burning sensation spread throughout Ouyang Shua's body. Ouyang Shua did not dare to be negligent. He immediately sat cross-legged and circulated the inner canon of the Yellow Emperor that he had just learned. Immediately, a weak golden inner strength appeared out of nowhere in Ouyang Shua's dantian. It flowed along his meridians and circulated throughout his body. Indeed, the burning sensation immediately subsided wherever the golden inner strength passed. 15 minutes later, Ouyang Shua's body regained its calm as a system notification rang in his ears. System notification. Congratulations to player Not Wearing for consuming Chiyo's Blood Essence and successfully activating the God of Combat talent. Please check the details yourself. Ouyang Shua could not wait to open his stats panel to see what changes had happened. Name, How Do I Have No Clothes title. Kingdom Knight. Increases favorability of historical figures by 25. Territory, Shanghai Town Occupation. General, part-time. Level 48, merit points. 30400/51200, noble title. First class Earl, reputation. Fame, 13350/1000, internal strength. 1/100 root bone. 18+2, comprehension. 21+1 fortune. 5, charm. 8, commander. 63+10 martial power. 26+5 intelligence. 15, politics. 52, talent. God of War, permanently increases combat strength by 20. Characteristics, Demon God's Possession, increases combat strength by 200, lasts for half an hour, causes a weakened state. Mental Cultivation Method, Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor, Qi Nurturing Chapter, Level 112, Cultivation Methods, 8 Extremes Fist Scripture, Advanced, Yang Family Spear Scripture, First Glimpse, Art of War, 6 Secret Strategies, Martial Strategy Volume, Skills, Intermediate Diplomacy, Advanced Detection, Advanced Weapon Mastery, Savage Beast Taming, Basic, Mount, Elite Green Beetle Horse, Purple Gold, Accessories, Ring of Courage, Black Iron, Barbaric Strength, Silver, Armor, General Radiant Armor, Purple Gold, Weapons, High Quality Composite Bow, Gold, High Quality Fine Iron Sword, Gold, High Quality Fine Iron Spear, Gold. Special items, Bloodthirst Talisman, Stamina Talisman, Military Talisman. Substitute Dalchio's blood was indeed amazing. Not only did it unlock the God of War's talent, but it also gave rise to the Demon God's Possession characteristic. Moreover, after practicing inner canon of the Yellow Emperor, Ouyang Shua finally unlocked the attribute of inner energy. The first level of inner canon of the Yellow Emperor had an upper limit of 100 points of inner energy. Only by maxing out his inner energy would he have the chance to advance to the next level. Of course, the changes brought about by inner canon of the Yellow Emperor did not stop there. Not only did it give him two innate attributes, the extremely precious root and comprehension, it also gave him acquired attributes. Every level of inner canon of the Yellow Emperor was equivalent to increasing his level by 5 levels. After dealing with Chiyo's blood, Ouyang Shua took out the last item, the wolf fang necklace given to him by the Yellow Emperor. The reason why Ouyang Shua took the risk to ask for the Yellow Emperor's personal item was obviously not without reason. Wolf fang necklace, the Yellow Emperor's personal item. It has a magical effect. The wolf fang necklace was not an accessory that could be worn. It was a special item. In his previous life, some players wondered if the Yellow Emperor's personal item would change if it was placed in the Ancestral Hall. After all, the Yellow Emperor was the ancestor of the human race. The Ancestral Hall in Shanghai Town worshipped the Yellow Emperor. Unfortunately, this player's speculation was not verified in his previous life. This time, Ouyang Shua completely held the attitude of giving it a try and wanted to verify this conjecture. The reason why he only made this request after receiving the reward was because he was afraid that the Yellow Emperor would take back the book that was supposed to be given to him. If that happened, he would not even have a place to cry. Fortunately, the final result was not bad. In fact, it could even be called perfect. The Yellow Emperor actually gave a necklace that he had always worn to Ouyang Shua. One must know that such an accessory had a very strong symbolic meaning in the wilderness. During the short trip to the wilderness, Ouyang Shua noticed that whether it was the Yellow Emperor, the Yin Emperor, Qi Yu, or even the Luo ancestor and the girl, all of them wore similar accessories. On the other hand, important officials like the Wind Empress and Li Mu did not have the right to wear it. One could imagine that such an accessory should be the symbol of the Yellow Emperor's identity. Ouyang Shua really wanted to know what would happen if he placed the necklace that the Yellow Emperor gave him in the Ancestral Hall in Shanghai Town. Unfortunately, after Ouyang Shua's actions, it was already past 6 in the evening. There was not enough time. He could only go to the Ancestral Hall tomorrow morning. Ouyang Shua came out of the office and walked into the backyard. After saying goodbye to Ying Yu and Qing Er, he returned to his room and went offline. To be continued. Chapter 145. After logging off, Ouyang Shua heaved a sigh of relief. Although only 2 days had passed in the real world, Ouyang Shua had logged off countless times. It was truly torturous. After sending Binger to school, the first thing Ouyang Shua did when he got home was to sleep. He didn't wake up until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Ouyang Shua made some food in the kitchen. After filling his stomach, he returned to his room, turned on his optical computer, and logged into the game forum to check the latest news in the game. The hottest topic in the forum was naturally the Battle of Zhuolu that had just ended. Because the players who participated in the mission often logged off, the gossip about the battle never stopped. Basically, all the incidents that happened on the battle map were exposed by the players in a timely manner. In this Battle of Zhuolu, Ouyang Shua and the League of Mountains and Seas, led by him, were in the limelight. The forum was overwhelmingly in favor of Ouyang Shua. Now, the League of Mountains and Seas had become the symbol of the China region. Of course, it was inevitable that the mysterious veil of Shanghai Town was unveiled by the players. Whether it was the mountain barbarian soldiers in infantry armor or the heavy armor cavalrymen in radiant armor riding cyan beetle horses, they were all displayed in front of the world without reservation. Especially the battle between Shi Wansui and Qi Yu at the end. It was earth-shattering. Naturally, the news of Shanghai Town having an emperor-level historical general spread like wildfire. All of this put a lot of pressure on the overlord players in Lianzhou Basin. What was even more infuriating was that they still didn't know where Shanghai Town was located in Lianzhou Basin. The players with the slightest bit of ambition were already restless after learning more about the Shanghai town. Previously, no matter how famous Shanghai town was, it was just an empty reputation. This time was different. With the exposure of Shanghai town's army, it was a complete show of strength. The Lianzhou Basin's feudal lord players couldn't help but shudder at the thought that such a leviathan was hiding near their territory. On the forum, in addition to the voices supporting the League of Mountains and Seas, there were also many discordant voices. Some people pointed out that Ouyang Shuo had used his identity as an inhuman representative to frame other overlord players. He was extremely cunning and didn't deserve to be the leader of the China region. There were many people who supported this argument. Most of them were players who had suffered in the battle map. Ouyang Shuo dismissed such arguments with a smile. This time, Di Chun didn't ask for a snub. From the beginning to the end, he didn't say a word. Apart from news regarding the Zhuolu battle, Ouyang Shuo was most concerned about the global promotion of county cities. In the international section, Ouyang Shuo saw that players from other regions had already applied to the system to be promoted to a level 1 county. However, none of the territories had passed the test and successfully advanced to the next level. The earliest application was from Mikasa Town in the Japanese region. Keisuke Honda was too eager for success, and in the absence of adequate preparation, he acted rashly in order to fight for the honor of being the world's #1 prefecture. With the lesson of Mikasa Town, the other lords did not dare to act rashly. One had to know that one failure basically meant that one had completely withdrawn from the competition for the #1 county in the world. Ouyang Shuo made up his mind. As long as none of the territories succeeded, Shanghai Town still had a chance. He had already made up his mind to submit an application to the system after he went online today. After exiting the forum, Ouyang Shuo started to cultivate the inner canon of the Yellow the Arch while he still had time. That time in the game, he had already gotten the hang of it and could now practice it in real life. In order to avoid being disturbed, Ouyang Shuo deliberately switched off his phone and locked his bedroom door, completely isolating himself from the outside world. When he really started cultivating, the difficulty was greater than Ouyang Shuo had imagined. The first step was to hold his breath and focus without any distracting thoughts. In the game, players existed in a form similar to a spiritual body, so it was easier to enter the state. But in reality, people had too many distracting thoughts, and they were more restricted by their desires. It was really not easy to be completely free of distracting thoughts. Fortunately, Ouyang Shuo's temperament and mental fortitude had improved greatly recently. He tried to completely empty his mind and not think about anything. When his heart had completely calmed down, he began to circulate his energy according to the inner canon of the Yellow the Arch. 10 minutes later, a trace of golden inner force slowly appeared in his dantian. Ouyang Shuo didn't dare to be negligent. He circulated this trace of inner force along his meridians. The weak meridians were nourished by the inner force and became more resilient. At the same time, it nourished the inner force and made it thicker. After one circulation, the very first thread of inner energy had already turned from the thickness of a strand of hair to the thickness of a nylon thread. Ouyang Shuo was secretly excited. He persisted and continued to circulate it 3 more times. At this time, his meridians were already swollen and painful. Ouyang Shuo didn't dare to be greedy and immediately stopped the circulation. Looking at the 4 traces of inner force floating in his dantian, Ouyang Shuo felt a great sense of accomplishment. No wonder people say that cultivating is fascinating. After he stopped, Ouyang Shuo picked up his phone and turned it on. It was actually 6 o'clock at night. Damn it, Bing'er and Xiaoya should have gone home at this time. I haven't prepared dinner yet. Ouyang Shuo opened the door and saw Bing'er watching cartoons in the living room, while Xiaoya was busy in the kitchen. Brother, you're at home. Sister Xiaoya just called you and said that your phone was turned off. Bing'er was very surprised to see Ouyang Shuo walk out of the room. Ouyang Shuo walked to the sofa and pinched the little girl's face. Brother overslept. Oh, Bing didn't care and continued watching her cartoons. Ouyang Shua got up and walked into the kitchen. Seeing Sun Xiaoya busy, he said apologetically, "I'm sorry, Xiaoya. I overslept in the afternoon." Sun Xiaoya turned her head and said, "It's okay. I know that you players who participated in the battle map have been sleeping day and night for the past 2 days. You definitely need to catch up on sleep today. I just didn't expect you to be so good at sleeping. You've slept the whole day." Ouyang Shua smiled bitterly. He couldn't tell her that he was cultivating. While eating, Ouyang Shua rarely cared about Sun Xiaoya's progress in the game. "Xiaoya, how are you playing the game? How long will it take for you to graduate from the Royal City Architecture School?" "Soon. I can graduate in a week at most," Sun Xiaoya said confidently. "So soon?" Ouyang Shua was a little surprised. "That's for sure. Plus, I made a lot of friends in Dali. They're the same as me. They don't like fighting and killing. They've all chosen life classes." Ouyang Shua nodded. It seemed that Xiaoya had really found her own joy in the game. After dinner, Ouyang Shua watched TV with Bing for a while before returning to his room and logging into the game. After going online, Ouyang Shua anonymously sent 200 gold coins to Xiaoya in case he forgot about it when he was busy. It was completely different from 3 months ago. Shanghai Town had enough funds, so Ouyang Shua sent a few more gold coins. It just so happened that Xiaoya said that she had made a lot of new friends. It was always good to have more gold coins on her. Back in his office, Ouyang Shua told the clerk by Nanpu to inform the 4 directors and the battalion commanders that a military and political meeting would be held at 3 in the afternoon. Ouyang Shua got up and went to the meeting hall, silently thinking about the promotion request. With a flash of white light, a golden stone tablet slowly rose from the ground in the middle of the meeting hall. He pressed his right hand on the front of the stone tablet, and a system notification sounded. System notification, testing the promotion requirements for Shanghai Town. Condition 1. The population has reached the maximum of 10,000 people, meeting the requirements. Condition 2. All basic buildings have been completed, meeting the requirements. Condition 3. The feudal lord must be at least a 3rd-class earl, meeting the requirements. Condition 4. The political, economic, cultural, and military indexes must not be lower than 45 points, meeting the requirements. System notification. Congratulations to player who says nothing for establishing Shanghai Town. All the requirements have been met. Do you want to apply for promotion? Yes. System notification. Congratulations to player who says nothing for successfully applying. In 3 days, there will be a large-scale bandit attack on Shanghai Town. Please prepare in advance. What Ouyang Shua didn't know was that when he applied for promotion, Di Chun had also applied to the system. It was still unknown who would win. What was more frustrating was that because of the China region's battle map, Ouyang Shua had fallen behind the other feudal lords. Apart from the Japanese region's Mikasa Town, which had already been confirmed as a failure, the American region's Liberty Town and the Indian region's Bangalore Town would be tested by the system in the next 2 days. As long as one of these 2 towns succeeded, Shanghai Town would completely lose the right to compete for the title of the world's #1 county. There was no point in thinking too much. All Ouyang Shua could do now was to do his job well. Apart from praying for Liberty Town and Bangalore Town to fail, it was more important to be prepared to face the enemy. Otherwise, when these 2 towns failed, the Shanghai Town would also fail. That would be a joke. At the end of April, when the Storm Tribe was subdued, Shanghai Town had a chance to apply for promotion. However, Ouyang Shua eventually gave up because he hadn't made enough preparations back then. Ouyang Shua only had one of the trump cards he relied on, the bed crossbow developed by the Archery and Crossbow Division. He was worried. At the beginning of May, 1,000 elite barbarian warriors were reorganized. Following that was Operation Dawn, which was to destroy the Tianpiao tribe and seize the green beetle horses. After Operation Dawn, Ouyang Shua was prepared to apply for promotion. However, the military mission came unexpectedly and completely messed up his plans. In the Battle of Zhuolu, Shanghai Town had lost 300 elites. Originally, Ouyang Shua had planned to wait until the recruits were replenished before applying for promotion. However, the applications from Liberty Town and Bangalore Town had once again messed up Ouyang Shua's plans. He had no choice but to apply for promotion in advance. With such haste, Ouyang Shua didn't have full confidence that he could succeed in one go. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.